After Shiki and Kugisaki finally hit their breakthrough in their game of tag, their victory is cut short by an urgent call. Kyoto Oni Corp is under attack.
Oh my god!
With the Momotaro launching a surprise assault, Medano students are thrown into real battle. Is this the moment they prove themselves? And just what kind of enemy awaits them in Kyoto? Let's find out. Because of the request they received, the class's game of tag was interrupted. The scene shifted far away from Rakshaka Academy. While aboard a yacht, Shiki proudly boasted that he had finally managed to get rid of his horn. Yaoroshi called him a moron and told him to shut up, saying they had all done that a long time ago. Shiki was offended and threatened him, asking if he wanted to die. Yaoroshi didn't back down and dared him to try, calling him a small fry. While they were bickering, Yusurube called for their teacher's attention. When he came over, Yusurube asked if it was really okay for them to go to a place where a battle against the Momotaro Corporation was happening. Mudano replied that they didn't have a choice. The teachers and other personnel from the other classes weren't available because they were currently undergoing training. Besides, he added, they weren't actually going to see the battle. They were only heading there for routine duties. Kogasaki couldn't believe what he heard. Shiki was confused when he learned they weren't going to fight. Yaoroshi replied that they hadn't even trained yet for the game of tag, and now they were being made to run errands. Yusurube thought that routine duties were still a job worth doing, but Yaoroshi insisted that he wanted to accomplish something in combat, then mocked Yusurube by calling him Four Eyes. Because of that, Yusurube took off his glasses so he wouldn't be called that again. When Shiki asked again if they were really just going there to do errands, Mudano confirmed it, saying he had no intention of increasing the body count. Shiki clearly didn't like that response. Sazanami, who was seated, jumped into the conversation and told them to just not mind any of that. But she asked why they even had to wear standard school uniforms for this. Their teacher explained that other outfits drew too much attention, especially their horns. He also added that she needed to quit smoking. He could smell it strongly. Sazanami was surprised by that comment and told him to mind his own business. She suddenly stood up and blushed, wondering if Mudano was worried about her body, though she denied being happy about it or anything. In Yusurube's thoughts, he said that was the scent of something pure. On the other hand, Kiriyama called for their sensei and asked what exactly was done during routine duties. He admitted that whenever he was surrounded by too many people, his heart would start beating rapidly, so he thought he might have some kind of heart condition. Mudano replied that he would explain now, but then Kiriyama added that he also felt like vomiting and asked if it might be a stomach tumor and if he was going to die. Mudano told him it was just seasickness. He then began explaining what they would be doing. He said the Oni Corps had various units stationed all over the country for necessary assignments. The missions assigned to those units were divided into two groups. The first was the attack squad, which defends against the Momo Corps whenever they launch attacks. In addition to that, there was also the support squad, which searches in cities for Oni who no longer have any relatives, in order to take them in and care for them. They provide support for their livelihood, along with both physical and psychological medical care, and they help those attacked by Momo Corps members. Now, they were on their way to assist the support squad. Everyone, except for Biabagora, who would remain at the academy to rest, since it seemed she wouldn't be waking up for several more days. Shiki, on the other hand, felt like he was letting a chance to get stronger slip by. More than that, he knew the man who killed his father, Samidare, was there. Though he didn't say anything aloud, Mudano said that the Momotaro he was looking for wasn't in Kyoto. Just like the Oni Corp, the Momotaro Corp was also divided into units. Yusurube became curious and asked what kind of people the Momotaro from Kyoto were. Mudano looked out toward the sea and said that they were dangerous people. The scene shifted to a member of the Oni Corp who had just received a call over the radio. The voice on the other end was asking for details about what was happening there, but he never got the chance to respond. That was because his head had already been severed. One of the Momotaro members was holding his head and asked if those people were the third group. His female companion replied that it seemed so. The corpses of Oni Corp members were already piled up in that parking lot. Blood was splattered all over the area. The man was revealed to be Mamamiya Tsubikiri of the Momotaro. He called them maggots moving in formation, mocking whether they were pretending to be an army or actual people. He said they were hilarious. The woman, Mamakusa Yamogi responded that she didn't care, but he always went overboard, making cleanup more difficult. Tsubakiri threw the severed head he was holding and asked if it didn't irritate her to see those maggots swarming like that. He said he wished they at least sent a female Oni this time. The last woman he had for research had just died the other day. He explained that females were more resistant to pain, so they lasted longer. He was about to say something more about their organs, but Yamogi interrupted and told her senpai that his research was disgusting and that she hated it, especially the thing she pointed. The shadow of the thing she was referring to appeared near the fallen head, and Tsubakiri told her not to call it a thing. It was a mix of monkey, dog, and pheasant. He called it aguri. The aguri picked up the severed head and ate it. Yamogi asked if that wasn't gross. Then what is it? Tsubakiri smiled and said she was so mean. That creature was the product of his research, a loyal life form that only ate Oni. A perfect anti-Oni bioweapon. Yamogi said she knew he was obsessed with his research and his junk, but their job as Momotaro was to eliminate Oni and protect civilians from the shadows. Tsubakiri acknowledged that, but said he just wished the weak Oni could be left to the subordinates. Yamogi grew curious and asked why someone like him was even in the Momotaro Corporation. He answered that he simply couldn't resist his curiosity about Oni blood. It could regenerate quickly, form weapons, and go berserk. Wasn't that incredible? He asked. As for Yamogi, she said she was only there to kill Oni. They needed to die before they could go berserk and hurt others. And if he wanted to continue his research, she thought he simply needed to contribute to the corp in some way, so they'd keep allowing him to stay. According to Tsubakiri, because of his research on Oni blood, they now had the ability to control it. That would make it a great asset to them. To him, the ability to heal is extremely enticing. If they could create medicine using that blood, he believed it would sell well. And that would be more than enough of a contribution. Not that he actually cared about money. Yamogi asked if they didn't already have powers like that. What was she even talking about? He questioned. Even if their abilities were similar, Tsubakiri said it was still fruitful to research using those maggots since they didn't care if they died. They had no value except to serve as research subjects. Not far from them, a young boy had overheard everything. He was crying and desperately trying to keep quiet so they wouldn't notice him. He felt relieved when he heard them say they were moving to another location. But suddenly, Tsubakiri peeked over at him and smiled, knowing that was exactly what the boy had been hoping to hear. The boy was shocked when he saw him. Tsubakiri said he was lucky, since they were running out of young Oni for his research. If they were going to take him in, Yamogi volunteered to put him to sleep. Without hesitation, she struck the boy in the face, causing him to fall to the ground. Because of that, his blood splattered onto Tsubakiri's white coat, irritating him. Yamogi let out a sigh as the boy hit the floor, clearly hurt. But they still weren't done with him. Tsubakiri kicked him directly in the face over and over, saying that whenever he did research, he always used a disposable lab coat. He might be interested in Oni blood, but to him, it was still dirty blood. And now that blood was on his uniform, he said, pointing to it. Then he suddenly smiled and asked the boy if his parents were there since he wanted to complain to them. The bruised and crying boy couldn't respond. Tsubakiri said there were too many corpses lying around, making it hard to tell. He activated his ability, and particles emerged from his body. Once again, he asked if the boy could figure out which ones were his parents. Fear was clear in the eyes of the young Oni. That was because Tsubakiri levitated the bodies and severed heads of the Oni they had killed and brought them before him. He said there were probably too many of them for the boy to find who he was looking for. The boy stepped back in horror. Tsubakiri said maybe it would be easier to search if he just stick them all together in one pile. He demonstrated by clasping his hands together, creating a disturbing cracking sound. He stacked the corpses on top of each other. Upon witnessing this, Yamogi thought about how the Momotaro were able to fight because they could release what she called black bacteria from their bodies. Those had many uses. They could be used to create weapons, and in some cases, the bacteria could even be shot out directly. However, her senpai's fighting style was eerie. He could manipulate corpses by inserting the bacteria into them. And since Tsubakiri had already taken control of the Oni corpses there, he wouldn't be able to use them anymore. So he simply said that he'd go look for others instead. He then commanded Aguri to eat what he referred to as Oni Dango so that they would be gone from that place. Aguri began biting into the stacked body parts one by one. Tsubakiri then invited Yomogi to return to their work. Meanwhile, after traveling across the sea, Mudano and his students headed straight to the train station. They arrived at Kiyamazu Station. Shiki asked if the hideout was located there, and Yusurube thought that the Kiyamizu Temple was just nearby. Their teacher confirmed it and said they were going to the underground area of Kiyamizu Temple. A few moments later, a restaurant appeared before them. Mudano led them inside, and once they entered, he had everyone go down the stairs. Shiki was shocked to see that there was an even deeper stairway they had to descend. An elderly woman welcomed them as they came down. Shiki couldn't believe there was such a place beneath Kyoto. According to Mudano, some shops in the area had underground tunnels connected to Kiyamizu Temple. That temple itself had long-standing ties to the Oni, going back generations. Because of that, there were even stone monuments there honoring the ancestors of the Oni. He encouraged them to look up Morei and Adarui. Moments later, Shiki was surprised when Mudano told them they were already underneath Kiyamizu Temple. When he opened the door, they stepped into a vast, traditional Japanese-style space. It was the Oni Corporation's Kyoto branch. To Shiki, it looked like a mansion, and even Yusurube admitted he didn't expect to see something like that underground. They suddenly heard someone shouting from one of the rooms, calling for the doctor after finishing an examination on a patient. Upon hearing that, the doctor came out and said there was no need to rush. The person who had called out insisted they needed to hurry. That doctor turned out to be Oiranzaka Kyoya, the Kyoto branch support squad commander of the Oni Corporation. When he stepped out, he was surprised to spot Mudano, whom he called Dano-chi. He approached him, impressed at how quickly he had arrived. He said Mudano should have messaged him online to let him know. Mudano replied that he had just gotten there. Kyoya suddenly noticed Sazanami and commented that she was cute. He then asked his friend if his hair looked okay. He pulled out a mirror and started fixing it, annoyed that it wouldn't stay in place. He then asked Sazanami for her line, but she said he wasn't her type and declined. He wasn't expecting that and insisted he wasn't sad about it. He understood that timing was everything, after all. Shiki grew curious and asked what his deal was. Mudano introduced him as Oiranzaka Kyoya, the support squad commander. Kyoya added that he and Dano-chi were from the same year at Rakshasa Academy. Anyway, he said that was enough chatting, and he was heading to the front lines. Kyoya was surprised that he was already leaving. Shiki complained when he heard that and asked if they could go with him if he was going to fight. Yaroshi also didn't want to be left behind, saying he didn't want to end up as Kyoya's gopher. However, Mudano quickly skated away on his rollerblades. Kyoya commented that having a class full of rowdy kids must be tough. Mudano replied that he's free to make use of those rowdy kids and said his goodbye. A visibly angry nurse emerged from one of the rooms and called Kyoya back. He had no choice but to follow. When the nurse noticed the students, she asked if they were from Rakshasa. She had them change into different clothes so they could help out there. The students grew curious about what was inside that room. The nurse explained that injured Oni from all over Kyoto were being brought there. Inside, several men were lying down, their bodies wrapped in bandages. Some were coughing and having trouble breathing. Kyoya said most of them had been injured in the ongoing war in Kyoto. The nurse then requested help from the doctor. Shiki and Yaroshi were stunned when they saw the condition of one person there. Kyoya said he had just been brought in by the combat squad. He no longer had arms or legs, and his lungs had suffered severe damage. He was clearly struggling to survive, and Shiki thought to himself that the man probably had only about 3 minutes left. Even so, Kyoya told him he would be fine. He would take care of it, and that there was no problem. Shiki couldn't believe what he was hearing and nudged him. He insisted that no matter how they look at it, the man was already gone. He shouldn't be saying things like that. Kyoya called him a gentle kid. He said that even if it didn't show in his appearance, he was pretty important here. He tapped him on the back and told him there was a reason why such an important position had been entrusted to him. Then he told all of them that it was time to gain some work experience. The room was filled with frantic nurses working to assist the patients there. The scene shifted once again to the outskirts of Kyoto, where another Oni was seen collapsing. That too was the work of Tsubakiri and his group. An Aguri was still with him, continuing to devour the Oni without pause. Tsubakiri remarked that, honestly, it was proving to be incredibly helpful for them. He was referring to the group of Oni that had come out to intercept them. Tsubakiri was amused that Oni Corp personnel were just popping up from everywhere. You could see the frustration and anger on the faces of the group, accusing him of killing their captain and lieutenant. They were curious about just how powerful he really was. Off to the side, Medano's hand suddenly appeared, using his blood to create an umbrella. Tsubakiri was caught off guard by his presence. Mudano activated his after-rain reincarnation, summoning a small army of blood puppet archers. They floated in the air, positioned to fire arrows at the enemy. Meanwhile, Medano's blood umbrella extended all the way to the ground, shielding and protecting him. While the attack was underway, Tsubakiri spoke up, saying it had been quite a while since they last saw each other. Smoke filled the air, but Tsubakiri's shadow could be seen behind it. He commented that the surprise attack was pretty mean. That was because he had taken control of several Oni corpses and used them as shields. According to him, Mudano had only managed to hit the dead bodies. Mudano cursed at him. Then, Tsubakiri suddenly brought up a location in Kyoto where Oni were said to be secretly gathering. He asked if destroying that place might reduce the number of Oni around here. The group of Oni behind him clearly reacted in shock upon realizing that Mudano was there. Mudano responded to Tsubakiri by saying he didn't know. If he didn't know anything about that place, then Tsubakiri figured it probably didn't exist. Maybe he should just go sightseeing and leave. He even asked Mudano for recommendations on interesting places to sightsee. Mudano didn't reply right away. In his thoughts, he said he hated that man's intuition. He told him there was a place someone like him should visit. Tsubakiri became curious and asked where. Mudano replied, "Hell." He figured he had to defeat him immediately. So once again, he controlled his blood and prepared for battle. While the Kiyamazu Temple in Kyoto was crowded above ground, most people had no idea that hidden beneath it was the Kyoto branch of the Oni Corporation. Countless blood bags could be seen hooked up to the body of the support squad commander, Kyoya. This made Shiki curious as to why were they injecting that stuff into him instead of the patients. The nurse nearby shushed him. Meanwhile, Kyoya was speaking to a patient, asking him what he preferred, arms or legs. Since the patient was struggling to speak, Kyoya instructed him to close his mouth once if he wanted arms, and twice if he wanted legs. The patient slowly moved his mouth, and from that, Kyoya realized he wanted arms. The patient tried to say that his child liked being hugged, so Kyoya told him to make sure to hold them tight. However, he warned that a massive amount of blood would enter his body, and the pain would feel like hell. He asked him to endure it. Kyoya then used a scalpel to slice into his own skin and draw blood. He said that although his blood wasn't suitable for combat, it was extremely useful. When used this way, it could greatly accelerate the regenerative abilities for other Oni. He let his blood drip directly into the patient's mouth. The nurse called on the students to help restrain the patient. They hurried over and held him down. It was clear the man was in excruciating pain from the process. Shiki then noticed that the blood bags were being depleted quickly. The nurse then called out to Sazanami, Yusuru-Bei, and Kiriyama, telling them to stop just standing around like idiots and grab more blood from the next room. The three of them ran off to fetch more bags. Kyoya continued letting his blood drip into the patient's mouth. Soon after, Shiki was shocked when he suddenly saw the patient's arms and hands begin to grow back. He remarked that his arms and lungs seemed to be doing better now. The massive wound in his lungs had also closed up, and it looked like nothing had ever happened. After that, Shiki wondered if Kyoya could also heal the man's legs. Kyoya explained that he could use small amounts of blood repeatedly on the same person, but if he used a large amount all at once, the body would build up resistance to it. That meant it was impossible for him to regenerate the legs. The man's body would no longer accept it. Kyoya knelt down to speak with the patient. He told him that he believed it was time for him to leave the combat squad. Instead, he invited him to join the battle from the support squad side. And to make sure he'd still be able to run alongside his child, he said he would personally make sure to find him the best possible prosthetic legs. The patient couldn't hold back his tears upon hearing that. Kyoya added that, for now, he should focus solely on his rehabilitation. The patient expressed his deepest gratitude for what Kyoya had done. Kyoya then stood, and as he walked away from the students, he told them that this was what the war between the Oni and the Momotaro looked like, and that any one of them could end up like that man someday. He understood that they wanted to go to the front lines and that they had their reasons for it. However, The front lines are not the only place where battlefields exist. He told them to make sure they remembered this. The ones on the front lines are only able to give their full attention to what's in front of them because there are people assigned to protect their backs. He pointed to himself and said that behind the fighters, the job of the support squad was to save the wounded. That, he said, was his battlefield. The students were moved by what they heard. Yaoshi said that was incredibly cool. He admitted that at first, he didn't like him because he seemed like a playboy, but it turned out he was a real man. Shiki agreed, saying it gave him goosebumps despite how he was. Kyoya laughed and said it looked like he was becoming popular. Because of that, the students were willing to do anything he asked. They told him to just say the word. Kyoya then spoke to Shiki, saying he had a different task for him. Shiki grew curious and asked what it was. He told him to take care of Mei-chan, who was sitting nearby. Shiki wondered what was wrong with her. Kyoya explained that she had been brought in the day before after the Momotaro Corporation's attack, but her parents still hadn't been found. Kyoya insisted that even if Shiki looked like that, he was a nice guy, and that's why he wanted him to talk to the girl. Shiki had no problem with the task Kyoya gave him, which surprised Kyoya. While watching over the girl, Shiki was impressed to see that there was even an underground garden there. He approached Mei and introduced himself. He asked her if her parents were fans of Ghibli, since her name was Mei. She didn't answer him. Shiki commented on the silent treatment and asked what exactly he was supposed to do in that situation. But no ideas came to mind. So he asked if she wanted to go see the Kiyomizu temple instead. The girl grew curious and asked what that was. Shiki was completely shocked that she spoke and even more surprised that she didn't know what Kiyomizu was. He said it was something they taught in school. Mei lowered her head and shyly replied that she didn't go to school. Shiki didn't expect that answer. He figured she might be a bit of a troublemaker. Suddenly, Shiki was startled when someone shouted, calling for the doctor. When Kyoya stepped outside, he was met by a large group of support squad members carrying bodies. It looked like the defense squad had found a lot of corpses during their rounds, around 30, they said. Mei peeked out and noticed one of the bodies being brought in. She overheard the others talking about how many corpses there were and how they'd just been left there. Mei's eyes widened as she got their attention. It turned out she had seen her father and mother among the dead. Shiki felt pity for her, and Kyoya realized that those were the parents she had been waiting for. Tears poured from Mei's eyes as she approached the bodies of her parents and saw the condition they were in. Kyoya could only lower his head, admitting that he would never get used to that. The scene shifted back to the confrontation between Mudano and Tsubakiri, as Tsubakiri remarked that what he had done was mean. He added that it was also quite amusing. Then he suddenly wondered aloud whether his gift had already arrived, something that puzzled Mudano. More specifically, Tsubakiri said it was being delivered to them now. Mudano asked what he meant, and Tsubakiri explained that he had left corpses laced with his bacteria in places that were easy to find. He knew the Oni always recovered the bodies of their dead, not wanting to leave them abandoned. Tsubakiri revealed that those corpses he could manipulate would now be delivered straight to their hideout. Mudano couldn't believe what he was hearing. Back under Kiyomizu Temple, Kyoya announced that they would begin working on the other corpses. He asked for Shiki's help, though he said he would understand if he didn't want to. Still, Shiki agreed. He said he would help. Mei remained by her parents' bodies, which were lying side by side, still unwilling to leave their side. Back to Tsubakiri, he thought to himself that perhaps his gift had now arrived at their hideout. So, he decided it was time to see if his plan would work. One of the victims he had used was none other than Mei's father. Suddenly, his fingers began to twitch, moving under Tsubakiri's control. Suddenly, Mei's father's body stood up and grabbed her by the neck. The child could not understand what was happening and could do nothing but call out to him as daddy. Shiki turned toward her voice, confused at how he was still alive. He approached and asked what he was doing to his daughter. He wondered how the man had such strength. Kyoya quickly realized it was Tsubakiri's ability. He ordered Shiki to cover Mei's eyes. When Shiki asked why, he was simply told to do it, so he followed the command. Kyoya took out 2 scalpels and apologized to Mei. That was because he drove the scalpels into her father's head. He explained that there was a Momotaro in Kyoto named Tsubakiri who had the ability to manipulate corpses. Shiki was stunned at what he was seeing, still holding his hand over the eyes of the crying child. Kyoya added that in order to stop them, they had to destroy the brain. Beheading them would not work. Shiki supported the collapsing body of Mei's father. The child could not believe what was happening. Kyoya said that was the best he could do to make sure the man's face remained intact. Once again, he apologized to Mei. Shiki, burning with rage, punched the ground. He called Tsubakiri a giant asshole. Kyoya then remembered that 30 bodies had been brought in, and he urgently warned everyone to stay away from the corpses in the room. Meanwhile, something behind Shiki suddenly moved and grabbed him. It was Mei's mother. She began to strangle Shiki. Mei tried to run toward her mother to stop her, but Shiki told her to stay back. He was struggling to escape because of how strong she was. Aside from her, several of the other corpses lying in the room began to rise one by one like mummies. The support squad members were terrified as they saw this. Chaos broke out inside as the reanimated corpses began attacking the nurses and other staff. Kyoya wondered if every corpse in the room was under Tsubakiri's control. Mei continued crying and desperately begged her mother to stop. But Shiki told her not to come any closer. Kyoya was about to help, but even he was targeted by the corpses. Not just one, but several of them lunged at him. He fell to the floor and asked if this meant he was popular now. Shiki held Mei in his arms as he reached for something at his side, and it was the gun that had been given to him. Mudano had entrusted him with it back when they were on the yacht. At the time, he handed Shiki a handgun because his blood manipulation still wasn't reliable. However, the bullets inside were infused with his own blood. As a result, they would exponentially boost the weapon's firepower. Mudano told him to use it if the situation called for it. When Shiki pulled it out, he gently told Mei to close her eyes for a moment. Then he used the gun to shoot her mother in the head. He still held the child in his arms as he did it. Moments later, the loud thud of the body collapsing to the floor echoed in the room. Nearby, a corpse had jumped on top of Mudano to attack him, but Shiki quickly rescued him using the gun, firing a shot into the attacker. Kyoya was deeply grateful for this. He said the support squad wasn't meant for combat. He needed to relocate the patients to a more secure room. So he asked for Shiki's help in disposing of the bodies. Shiki agreed and entrusted Mei to him. Kyoya then ordered the support squad to focus on evacuating the patients to avoid further casualties. Meanwhile, the students of Rakshasa Academy prepared themselves for battle. Shiki cursed in frustration. He couldn't believe they now had to kill people who had already died. He said there was a limit to how sickening one can be. Each of them moved into action and began fighting the controlled corpses in the room. All the while, Tsubakiri was filled with joy, thrilled that his plan had worked. At that moment, doubt slowly began to creep into Shiki's mind, questioning what exactly he was doing. The people he was shooting at were dear to someone else, and they have people dear to them as well. He was now surrounded by a mindless horde controlled by Tsubakiri, and above all else, he had to shoot each and every one of those corpses. Countless emotions swirled inside him, leaving him confused and unable to think straight, on the verge of tears. He could feel the weight of the gun in his hands, as if every shot he fired pressed deeper into his conscience. He then remembered how Kyoya had stabbed Mei's father's brain with scalpels, and how he himself had shot Mei's mother, and now, according to him, he had thought that he was supposed to fight against the Momotaro, but it seems like he was fighting for them as he was killing fellow Onis. In the next scene, we return to the alley in Kyoto, to the battle between Mudano and Tsubakiri. Mudano was preparing his umbrella weapon using his own blood, while Tsubakiri calmly waited for him, showing no hint of fear on his face. Mudano tried to drive the umbrella into the Momotaro agent's body, but Tsubakiri used several Oni corpses as a shield. Mudano grew frustrated as his attack failed, while Tsubakiri laughed, saying it looked like a skewer. Suddenly, Tsubakiri's Aguri appeared beside Mudano, and he noticed the strange creature immediately. He quickly ducked to avoid the Aguri's attack, which instead hit one of the skewered Oni corpses. Blood splattered from the corpse as it collapsed, and Mudano closed his eyes, a sorrowful expression on his face. Tsubakiri asked why he looked so sad, asking if wasn't it better to have fewer vermin around. Mudano replied that there should be a limit to how depraved a person could be, to which Tsubakiri mockingly asked if someone more depraved than himself really had the right to say that, and it was so funny to him that he can't even laugh. At that moment, other Oni offered to support Mudano, but he ordered them to return to the hideout out of concern. Tsubakiri, however, told Yamogi that this could not be allowed. so Yomogi immediately acted, releasing black bacteria from her feet. A massive amount of black bacteria emerged from Yomogi, forming a cube that trapped the Oni. They wondered about the cube Yomogi had used to trap them, while Tsubekuri praised her skill. It was revealed that Yomogi's bacteria could create rooms of various sizes, making it impossible to enter or exit without her permission. Then Mudano asked Tsubekuri what his plan was, and Tsubekuri simply said it was nothing complicated. While Mudano and the other Oni remained there, they would head to the Oni's hideout. Mudano asked what he was talking about, and Tsubekuri laughed, saying Mudano must think he didn't know where the Oni hideout was. He explained that the corpses he had left behind contained transmitters, which made Mudano uneasy. Continuing his explanation, Tsubekuri said that the transmitters had already gathered in one place, which was beneath Kayamizu Temple, the Oni's hideout. As he spoke, Tsubekuri stepped a bit further into the room created by Yomogi, deliberately provoking Mudano, who was still trying to process this new information. Tsubekuri simply laughed and said they would be leaving now, so Mudano tried to stop them, but it was no use. Tsubekuri said that if Mudano managed to survive, he should come to the temple. Meanwhile, Yomogi gave the Aguri permission to enter. The strange creature did just that, and Tsubekuri explained that it was a mass-produced type, so it didn't matter if it was destroyed. As he spoke, he snapped his fingers, signaling the Aguri to enlarge its belly. The Oni were confused by what they were seeing, and Tsubekuri added that he was giving the Aguri to them. The Aguri screamed, and Mudano quickly realized what was about to happen. He warned his comrades to get away from the Aguri, but it was too late. The Aguri exploded, while Tsubekuri walked away with a smile, remarking that the explosion lacked beauty and that he should have improved it. Meanwhile, Mudano lay unconscious in the rubble. In the next scene, we return to the Oni hideout, where the lifeless body of an Oni lay sprawled on the ground, blood spread all around. Shiki could feel the cold sweat clinging to his skin, his breathing shallow and uneven, as he silently stared at the scene before him. He and his classmates had already defeated the Onis controlled by Tsubekuri, and according to Kyoya, the patients had been transferred to another location. He also said that Shiki and the others were a great help. Then, he noticed something to his left. It was Mei, and he told her to not come in. But even before he could finish speaking, Mei had already entered, walking right past him. She walked straight to the lifeless bodies of her parents, while Kyoya and the others silently watched. Shiki then apologized with heavy regret, saying he had to do it, but before he could finish, Mei told him she didn't mind. With sadness heard in her voice, she shared that she's always had to hide and had never attended school. They had just hid and ran away, making it an everyday thing for them. Because of that, she said she had come to accept that one day things would surely end up like this, so she really did not mind anymore. Upon hearing that, Shiki was struck by a realization and irritably questioned whether such words should even come from a young girl. He also wondered if heroes from fairy tales were supposed to fight like this, and if that were the case, he was fine with becoming evil. While thinking this, he gave Mei a tight and comforting hug, telling her everything would be okay. He assured Mei that from that point on, he would make sure the world was one where she could smile. He added that he would become evil and crush the heroes, and again reassured Mei that everything would be all right, as he continued holding her. Because of all that, Mei felt the assurance and comfort in his embrace and words. In the next scene, we shift to Tsubekuri, who was on a call, requesting that several Aguri be sent to the location he specified. He had just killed another Oni, saying unsurely that he would now explore Onigashima. We learned that the Oni he had killed was the elderly woman guarding the secret entrance beneath the temple. He added that when it came to Oni extermination, one should be accompanied by a dog, a monkey, and a pheasant, and instructed that they bring his special Aguri as well. After the call, Yomogi called out to him, and Tsubekuri asked what it was. Yomogi said that based on the echo, it seemed like the underground area was quite large, and they could not be sure how many Onis were inside, so she asked if they should just pump in poisonous gas. Tsubekuri replied that it was not a bad idea, but if the Oni noticed it before they entered, it could end badly for them, so they would go in personally. Besides, if they could not see things with their own eyes, they don't know what they may miss out on, and he said this with a menacing look on his face. Whether they encountered a pit of Oni or vipers, he would be satisfied either way. This showed just how confident he was in his own power, and in the background, Shiki could be seen, looking tense and serious, holding a gun, ready to face whatever came next. Then, Tsubakiri descended to the underground level with Yomogi, saying that they would now give this fairy tale a wonderful ending. At the next scene, Kyoya said that they needed to properly dispose of the bodies of their friends, and he instructed Shiki to take care of Mei. He then told Kogasaki that he would take him to the place where the bodies would be brought, so he should go with him. As for the others, he asked them to gather all the bodies in one place. His voice was calm, but beneath it, a faint tremor betrayed the weight of responsibility now resting on his shoulders. Then, he left together with Kogasaki and told him that there was a crematorium halfway through the tunnel they came from, and out of nowhere, he asked him if he had a girlfriend. Meanwhile, in the room where the bodies were, Yoroshi was struggling to lift a body, and at that moment, he noticed something to his right. It was Yusurube, who was standing still as if thinking, so he scolded him not to slack off, since he was already wearing his glasses, and yet that was all he was doing. Yusurube replied that he was not slacking off, and said that Yoroshi had some weird prejudice about his glasses. He also said that he thought that place was probably not safe anymore since they had been attacked, so he would be cautious. Yoroshi was puzzled by what he said, and Yusurube added that his ability was useful for security. As he said this, he bit his thumb, and a small amount of blood dripped out. He then used his blood erosion release, kneeling while holding his wrist, and in the background, a radar-like pattern appeared. He explained that he had a searching ability and could detect any life forms within a 5-kilometer radius of where he dropped his blood. He could even tell whether the life form was a Momotaro or not, though he admitted that he was not very good at it, so he could not always clearly identify who he sensed or how strong they were. At that moment, he sensed something that seemed to disturb him. He was so shocked by what he sensed that he could barely speak to describe it, leaving Yoroshi wondering what he had sensed. Then, we returned to Kyoya and Kogasaki standing in front of a door, and Kyoya said that there was not much to it than what he had just shown Kogasaki. He had already told the student to return and bring the bodies there, but suddenly the smile on his face vanished, and he stopped walking. He immediately turned around to check what he had sensed, and found that Tsubakiri had already stabbed him by his side. Blood flowed from his mouth because of this, and he is in complete shock at what had just happened. Tsubakiri mocked him, saying he had missed because he had moved. At that moment, Kogasaki immediately took action and released his saws, thinking that he already had enough experience to tell right away that Tsubakiri is bad news. He charged at the Momotaro agent, determined to kill him right away. However, Yomogi appeared behind him, forming what seemed to be a block behind his head using black bacteria. He immediately noticed this, and at the same time, Kyoya, who looked very worried for him, tried to reach him. Kyoya managed to grab Kogasaki, so Yomogi's black box of bacteria hit Kogasaki's arm instead of his head. Yomogi used it to break the student's arm, causing Kogasaki to wince in pain. Even so, Yomogi was unsatisfied, feeling that she had missed. At the same time, Kyoya called out to Kogasaki, who told him not to worry because his arm would heal in no time. Kogasaki knew that his Oni blood would help regenerate the wound, but the pain keeps clouding his thoughts. Moreover, both he and Kyoya were now wounded, leaving him wondering what to do next. For him, this was the worst-case scenario, but before he could finish, Kyoya asked him to inform the other squad members and his classmates that Tsubakiri was there. He also told him to prepare to escape with the others, including the patients. Kogasaki then asked what about him, but Kyoya replied that he would find a way. At that moment, Kogasaki noticed that blood was flowing from his side, so he left, saying that he would call for reinforcements. Because of this, Kyoya commented that Kogasaki was such a good boy, while Tsubakiri just called out to Yomogi, and without even receiving any instructions, she already knew what she is supposed to do. She then touched the floor, releasing black bacteria that seemed to form a wall behind Tsubakiri. Meanwhile, Kyoya noticed that Yomogi was forming walls of black bacteria, shocking him, and he realized that they were now trapped inside those walls, with nowhere to run. The rooms where Mei and Shiki were resting, the room half filled with bodies, and the rooms where the students and nurses were carrying bodies were all within the walls created by Yomogi's black bacteria. Yomogi said that she had almost surrounded the underground area of Kayamizu Temple, trapping the Oni like rats, and because of this, Kyoya jokingly remarked that beauties were such trouble. He thought that the entire underground was probably already surrounded. The students were the only ones combat ready, and they could not hope for any reinforcements. Most of all, standing before him now were two overwhelmingly powerful people, Tsubakiri and Yomogi, both wearing confident and smug expressions on their faces, with a menacing skull behind them that symbolized the disaster and death they brought to the Onis. Because of the enemies he was about to face, he took a deep breath and said to himself that he is gonna die. At that moment, Tsubakiri remarked that one thing had caught his attention, which made Kyoya wonder what he was referring to. Tsubakiri said he was pretty sure that he had heard the word Shiki before, quite recently. He asked Yomogi if it had been during a commander meeting, but Yomogi asked how she would know what happened in a commander meeting. She also said that Tsubakiri probably would not remember because all those meetings were remote and he was focused on other things during it. He agreed with her and said that they should file a report just in case. Meanwhile, Kyoya was wondering why the Momotaro knew Shiki's name and questioned to himself whether they knew about him. Because of this, he realized that there was no way he could back down now, and he revealed the many syringes hidden under his lab coat. From there, he took one, explaining that it was wolf's bane, a type of poisonous plant that causes respiratory and organ failure. Tsubakiri then asked if Kyoya was not going to try to escape, but deep inside, he knew he had nowhere to run. Kyoya then answered that he really wanted to escape, to be honest, but that Tsubakiri already knew he could not do it. As soon as he said that, Tsubakiri moved, charging straight at him. In an instant, he slashed Kyoya's neck deeply with a small knife, and as he calmly walked away, he mocked Kyoya, asking if what he said was true. Blood splattered from Kyoya's neck, and he thought that he needed to take in some blood, but before he could do so, he dropped the syringe he was holding and collapsed. All he could do was press on the wound on his neck, applying pressure, while Tsubakiri stared at him with his usual smug and confident expression. Kyoya thought that if he were going to die, he wished it would at least be Yomogi, whom he called Beauty, who would do it. The blood gushing from him was so strong, and as his head tilted further to the other side from the cut, the blood spattered even more. Meanwhile, with a cold and heartless expression on his face, Tsubakiri commented that despite everything, the color of Oni blood really was beautiful. It looked like it was raining blood inside that tunnel because of how much blood was pouring out of Kyoya, until eventually, all the blood had drained from the doctor, who now lay lifeless on the floor. The two Momotaro agents simply stared at him, and Tsubakiri mockingly asked if he was dead already. After that, he said he might as well take the doctor's body, since there were no other corpses here, and he had used black bacteria to engulf the body. The black bacteria started entering Kyoya's body, but Tsubakiri suddenly stopped it, saying better not to do it since what he had been waiting for had arrived. He told Yomogi to let them in, and Yomogi replied that she would. From the black bacteria wall, the hand of an aguri reached through, but it was not just one, but 4 aguri entered, each with different body sizes and heights. Tsubakiri asked them if they had brought the thing he was referring to, and from the mouth of one aguri, a box covered in its saliva came out. Tsubakiri said it was disgusting and told them to take care of it to keep it clean when they took it out of the bag. A sound came from inside the box, which pleased Tsubakiri. He then said that the preparations were complete, and at that moment, a sound came from his pocket. It was his cell phone, so he took it out and checked what it was. His eyes widened in shock at what he saw, which prompted Yomogi to ask what it was. However, he only gave a creepy smile, as if he were planning something sinister, and instructed Yomogi that before killing any Oni, she should first ask their names. Yomogi asked why, and he answered that he wanted to capture an Oni named Ichinose Shiki alive, if possible. Yomogi then asked what was special about Shiki, and Tsubakiri replied that apparently, Shiki was rather special, and that he wanted to research him. Helpless and vulnerable were the best words to describe the sorry state of all the Oni currently trapped by Yomogi. Even Kugisaki, despite being injured and barely able to walk, still managed to remove his shoes before entering the infirmary. As he stepped through the door, he immediately informed everyone that the Momotaro had arrived at their location. Then suddenly, He was shocked by the sight of the bloodied surroundings. He could barely sense any people inside the infirmary. Then someone called out to him. It was Shiki, along with some of his classmates and the remaining survivors of the initial remote attack launched by Tsubakiri. The others were still extremely alert and hypersensitive from the ordeal. Kugisaki asked if they were really the only ones left and what had happened. Shiki explained that thanks to Yusurube's ability, they found out early that the Momotaro were coming. Because of that, they rushed to move the injured above ground. Then, a black fog suddenly appeared and blocked their path. Fortunately, all the patients had already escaped, though some of them were left behind in the trap, including Mei. Kugisaki asked what had happened to Yusurube. Shiki said he was standing in a good position earlier, one that allowed him to easily escape to the surface, so he was with a few health workers carrying the injured to safety. After Shiki's explanation, Yoroshi spoke up, saying they should split up to search for an exit. But Pouty Lips said there were no more paths to escape. She had just checked all the passageways, but all of them were blocked by the black stuff. They were completely trapped inside. Shiki asked Kugisaki how Kyoya was doing, and as Kugisaki hesitated to answer, a demonic hand suddenly reached into their room. It was an Aguri. Shiki and the others were startled and wondered what that creepy-looking thing was. They still had no idea what it was, so the nurses just stood frozen inside the room. Then suddenly, the Aguri bit down on the nearest male nurse and devoured the entire top half of his body in one bite, and saving the hand for its last bite. Shiki and Yoroshi carefully watched the new monster they'd have to fight, but the other nurses were speechless with fear. Then, finally overcome with panic, they ran off screaming in terror. Shiki cursed at the situation, frustrated that their group had been split up again. But Yoroshi said that might actually be a good thing, since staying together would have made them easy pickings. Meanwhile, Kugisaki was still worried about what had happened to Kyoya. Shiki hadn't forgotten about Mei, so he told her to stay close to him. But Mei didn't respond. She just stared blankly at the floor, looking completely out of it. After that, we see that Tsubakiri had also arrived inside the infirmary. He was amazed at the underground facility the Oni had built. He immediately gave the order to his Aguri to wipe out all the Oni inside, except Shiki, who had to be captured alive. Yomogi then asked him if he wasn't going to join them. Tsubakiri just sat on the special casket he had brought and said he would just wait there in the bloody area, thinking things through and reconsidering his methodology. Yomogi clenched her fists and said she would head out, then summoned all the Aguri with them to come along and support her as backup. Meanwhile, inside the break room, we see someone opening a drawer full of clothes. It was Sazanami. She was rummaging through the cabinet to find a replacement for her stuffy clothes. After digging around a bit, she found some clothes she liked. Inside the break room, she was with Kiriyama, who was lying down and groaning that he was about to die. According to Kiriyama, he could feel his heart pounding hard and was also having trouble breathing. He was certain his heart was failing and that his airway was collapsing. He kept groaning, saying he couldn't take it anymore and this would be the end of him. Sazanami, already extremely irritated, screamed at him to shut up. She told him that what he was feeling was just from stress and exhaustion from running. Then, she told Kiriyama she was going to change her clothes, and if he peeked, she'd kill him. After changing, Sazanami was overjoyed and thankful to the original owner of the two-piece sportswear she now wore. She loved how it felt and how easy it was to move in. Kiriyama asked what she was planning to do. Still irritated, Sazanami replied that she was going to engage the enemy because there was no chance of escape and they had nothing else they could do. Kiriyama kept groaning that healthy people were so optimistic, but he said he could never think that way like Sazanami did. Then, sweating with fear and anxiety, Kiriyama brought up a tweet he had seen while they were traveling to Kyoto. It was about people getting sick, and he deeply regretted having seen it. He was terrified of catching that kind of illness from a bug. He also said he felt like his head was starting to hurt. He knew his anxiety was getting worse the more he thought about it. Sazanami, remaining tough, told him he was being too noisy, and if he didn't stop, they'd soon see where that led. But their conversation abruptly stopped when they heard heavy footsteps approaching the break room. Sazanami cursed, knowing the enemy was near, and the enemy had feet that looked like giant chicken legs. In the hallway, we see the approaching enemy. It was an Aguri. Because of this, Sazanami told Kiriyama that it looked like they had to do what needed to be done now. But Kiriyama panicked and said he couldn't do it. He said he couldn't fight while his own anxiety was killing him. Curling up in a blanket, he begged Sazanami to take care of both of them because he really couldn't handle it. Sazanami considered his request and asked if he meant that he needed her. Kiriyama repeatedly said yes, that he needed Sazanami. Sazanami took a deep breath, letting Kiriyama's words sink in. Then she told him to hide inside a closet by the side. Kiriyama asked if she was sure. Then, Sazanami suddenly broke into a sweat and blushed, saying wasn't she the only person Kiriyama could rely on? Dumbfounded, Kiriyama agreed. So Sazanami said that Kiriyama don't have to do anything to help her. For those who didn't know her, Sazanami was known as the reliable big sister, a dependable powerhouse. Many people loved and admired her. And to those close to her, she was known as the obsessively devoted woman. So for the battle ahead, she stretched her arms, tongue out, and excited. She told Kiriyama that she would do anything and everything for him. So Sazanami said, "Come at me, little monster," while making the equivalent hand gesture, the beckoning sign. Then the wall of the room started to crack as the Aguri began breaking through. Because of this, Kiriyama clutched his blanket tighter in fear and even let out a scream. The moment the Aguri broke through the wall of the break room, it immediately entered, and Sazanami prepared to face it alone. By this time, Kiriyama had managed to get inside the closet and was doing his best to remain silent. In his mind, he assured himself that even if he didn't understand what was happening, he was sure everything would be fine because Sazanami told him, "Leave it to me." Then he suddenly broke into a sweat from fear because it was too dark inside the closet. Meanwhile, Sazanami was slightly startled when the Aguri pointed a finger at her. It asked if she was Ichinose Shiki. Sazanami was caught off guard because she didn't expect that an Aguri could speak. Still, she answered the question and said if the Aguri thought she was that stupid-faced Shiki, then it was mistaken. The Aguri understood what Sazanami said and stated that under Tsubakiri's orders, it needed to kill Sazanami. It immediately launched a fast attack. Sazanami managed to dodge by dropping into a half-split. The wall behind her was destroyed as the Aguri's strike landed there. The impact was so strong that it knocked over the closet on the other side where Kiriyama was hiding. Kiriyama became dizzy and panicked internally, screaming silently in his head. Because of the overwhelming stress from fearing his own death, he completely blacked out and knocked himself unconscious. All the closets in the area toppled over due to the Aguri. Once the thick smoke from the rubble cleared, we see Sazanami still standing and telling the Aguri not to look smug just because it destroyed a wall. Then, by cutting her thumb with her teeth, she activated her power from her blood eclipse release. This is different from the usual blood erosion release we've seen. Sazanami's blood eclipse release is called pure pathologic passion, and using her Oni blood, she formed knuckle gloves on both her hands. The blush on her face showed she was excited to brawl. Like a true pathologic person, she shouted at the Aguri, "Let me take care of you forever." After a while, Kiriyama suddenly woke up and immediately panicked. He checked his hand to see if he was okay. He felt that his heart had stopped beating earlier, so he wanted to make sure there were no lasting effects. Then his expression turned serious when he noticed how suddenly quiet it was outside the closet. He wondered why. Then he figured it out. Kiriyama realized that everything that happened earlier was all just hallucinations. He fully believed this gaslighting of himself. He thought there was no way that situation was real, so he must have just fallen asleep inside the closet and had a dream. He felt relieved of all his worries, fears, and stress. So, he opened the closet door and said that when he gets out, he's going straight to a psychiatrist. But the moment he stepped out, he immediately saw the Aguri lying sprawled in front of him on the floor. It even looked like it was staring at him, which caused him extreme shock. The shock was so intense that his face didn't even have time to react, still frozen in a smile. Because of this, he simply went back inside the closet, drenched in sweat. He asked for a timeout because he was feeling something really weird in his heart. Then he lay down properly while clutching his chest and tried to play dead. He wasn't sure if it would work, but he was taking the chance. Then he wondered why the Aguri didn't attack him. Instead, it simply walked away. Kiriyama couldn't believe the Aguri did nothing to him. Next, we see Sazanami scolding the Aguri as if she had authority over it. She told the Aguri to come closer. The Aguri obeyed the command and slowly walked towards Sazanami, who told it to bring its face close to her hands. Kiriyama once again covered himself with the blanket while watching what was happening. He wondered why the Aguri was listening and following Sazanami. Once the Aguri was close enough to Sazanami, Sazanami suddenly fed it a knuckle sandwich. The Aguri fell flat on its back from the strength of the punch. It couldn't stand up anymore because of the pain and just trembled in fear. Sazanami immediately followed it up with 2 more punches, and almost all of the Aguri's teeth were gone because of it. Sazanami climbed on top of the Aguri's body and relentlessly rained punches down on it. She even laughed like a madman while beating it up, asking what its problem was and why it couldn't get up anymore. She also asked why the Aguri was sleeping. This is Sazanami's ability that makes her look insane, pure pathologic passion. Once Sazanami gets enough of her blood on a target, they lose their will to fight and effectively become powerless. This is exactly what she did to the Aguri she just defeated. She flexed the muscles of her sweating body and pinned down the Aguri with 1 foot while laughing and saying, "You're not worth my time." Kiriyama was so terrified he clutched his blanket even tighter. Sazanami's loud laughter literally sent shivers down his spine. Meanwhile, in a hallway near Sazanami, we suddenly see a lone female nurse who was struck in the forehead by a spike that pierced her brain. Her corpse collapsed to the floor, and an Aguri stepped on the blood pouring from her head. Its squishy footsteps echoed as it walked, leaving behind bloody tracks. This Aguri had a creepy appearance with a slender and tall figure. Let's get to know Sazanami Kuina better and understand why she's called obsessed. Many men have fallen victim to her obsessive behavior. She's the type of woman who forces her man to eat her cooking and then suddenly forces him to brush his teeth afterward. She doesn't allow her man to work because there are other women in the workplace and she gets jealous easily. She would rather be the one in charge of earning all the money they need. As a man, if you don't notice the danger and leave early, you'll definitely be stuck with her until the day comes when you can't do anything by yourself. Whenever a weak man starts relying on Sazanami, she becomes even more enthusiastic. A perfect sample is Kiriyama, who is a weak man. After overcoming his fear, he was amazed to see that Sazanami was able to defeat the Aguri on her own. Sazanami was pleased with Kiriyama's reaction, so she confidently reminded him that what she said earlier was true. He didn't even need to lift a finger. From her smile alone, it was confirmed that she was obsessed again, and the man she was now obsessed with was Kiriyama. After removing the blanket he used to cover himself, Kiriyama immediately prostrated in front of Sazanami in gratitude. He said he would never forget the favor she did for him, unless he developed amnesia. Sazanami felt a powerful thrill from this, and Kiriyama only fed her obsession even more. Because of this, Sazanami prepared a futon for Kiriyama to lie on and told him not to take his gratitude too seriously. Then Kiriyama suddenly realized he was already lying on the futon and covered with a blanket. And not only that, Sazanami was now lying beside him on the futon. Kiriyama wondered in his head how he suddenly ended up there, while Sazanami told him to just stay and rest. Once he wakes up, all of this will be over, she promised. Then Sazanami moved her face closer to Kiriyama's. Sazanami noticed that Kiriyama's face suddenly turned pale, so she thought of doing something to make him feel better. Kiriyama mentioned that Sazanami was getting too close to him. That was actually the reason he turned pale. What Sazanami really wanted to do was cook something for Kiriyama to eat. So she asked what his favorite food was, then stood up and stretched her arms. While Kiriyama remained lying on the futon, he questioned what was going on with Sazanami and why she was doing everything for him. After thinking it over, he became limp as he realized it was a trap. His body shook violently because he believed Sazanami would only use him as bait for the monsters once he fell asleep. Then she would leave him behind while the Aguri ate him. Sazanami grew very concerned when she saw him trembling, so she asked if he's got a cold and if he wanted to sip some soup. But at that very moment, the slender man Aguri arrived at the break room. It entered through the large hole in the wall made by the previous Aguri and strutted towards Sazanami. Kiriyama was terrified of the slender man Aguri and once again moaned that he was going to die. Meanwhile, Sazanami was simply annoyed because another piece of scum had entered the room. But before she could face her new opponent, the slender man Aguri launched a tentacle-like thing at Sazanami's face. Sazanami managed to dodge. Now we see that this tentacle was actually the entire right arm of the slender Managuri. It could stretch its limbs like rubber, and they bounced back like rubber as well when returning to their original form. Kiriyama hid inside a nearby chest, terrified because the tentacle that attacked Sazanami looked like a parasite worm. Sazanami sensed something strange about the slender man Aguri standing before her. It wasn't like the other Aguri, but she bravely confronted it and spoke. Veins popped on Sazanami's forehead from anger because the slender man Aguri had interrupted her time with Kiriyama. So she immediately jumped high to attack the slender man Aguri and aggressively shouted that she would play with it instead. While in midair, Sazanami once again used her knuckle gloves from her ability Pure Pathologic Passion. The diving fist Sazanami delivered was fast, and within just 0.12 seconds it could hit the slender man Aguri's face. But at 0.43 seconds, the slender man Aguri quickly dodged its head. But it didn't just dodge. It rapidly stretched and morphed into a blade that flew behind Sazanami to stab her. Kiriyama was worried because he saw that the slender man Aguri managed to inflict a deep and large puncture wound on Sazanami's left shoulder. The slender man Aguri quickly followed up its attack with a grapple move using its stretched arms. Its arms wrapped around Sazanami's arms like tentacles as restraints. Everything happened so fast that Sazanami had only just started wincing in pain from the shoulder wound. It was only then that she realized she couldn't move her arms anymore, and she was suddenly flung upward by the strong force of the tentacle arms that yanked her. She couldn't do anything but accept the brutal slam of the Aguri that smashed her into the floor. Sazanami just coughed from the force of the impact. Next, while she was still lying down and restrained, the Aguri rushed at her to stomp on her face. The Aguri rained multiple face stomps on Sazanami and didn't stop until it had landed several attacks, and its soles were surrounded by Sazanami's blood. It only stopped stomping when it saw Sazanami's bloody face, barely conscious and mumbling gibberish. Sazanami remained bloodied and sweating, lying motionless on the ground after the ordeal. Meanwhile, inside the chest, Kiriyama could only cover his mouth to stop himself from screaming in fear. He was also scared for Sazanami because he knew she would die if the slender man Aguri attacked her again. He didn't know what to do, even though he knew Sazanami now needed help. He knew that no one else could help her except him, but he was terrified that the slender man Aguri might just kill him too. He remained curled up in fear, praying that an ally would come to save them. He viewed himself as nothing more than dead weight. Then he looked at his hand and asked himself when he had become a coward. In horror, he could only clutch his face. Now let's turn to Kiriyama, as we get to know him through a flashback that reveals a part of his past involving a woman. For Kiriyama, this woman was his breakwater. Her name was Ruru, his first love, and she was 1 year older than him. They met in their quiet rural town, where many Oni lived secretly and peacefully among humans. One of their favorite things to do on their dates was free diving off a high cliff into the sea. Whenever Kiriyama was with Ruru, he felt like nothing was impossible. When he was with her, he felt like even becoming a hero or a poet was within reach. One day after a cliff diving session, Kiriyama expressed his joy and pride in what he had just done. Ruru looked happy watching him. But as Kiriyama talked about how he wanted to jump off an even higher cliff next time, Ruru noticed something that worried her. She saw that Kiriyama's entire right arm wouldn't stop trembling. At this moment, she knew that Kiriyama is actually always afraid, but it's her very presence that makes him forget all about his fears. At that time, Ruru was still very gentle in the way she watched over Kiriyama. Even though she was seriously ill, Ruru remained warm and affectionate while by his side. According to Kiriyama, once an Oni's horns begin to develop, the physiology of their blood changes. Because of this, they can no longer go to an ordinary hospital. And during that time, they only had one Oni doctor they could rely on in their local town. But one day, disaster struck. The Mamataro Corporation invaded their town, and one of the Oni they killed was that sole Oni doctor. Unfortunately, it wasn't long before Ruru's terminal illness worsened. But despite this, Kiriyama continued to promise her that everything would be all right. He even planned to run all the way to the nearest town and bring back a doctor who could help. He reassured Ruru that he had never failed to do something he set his mind to. Ruru agreed and told him he was right. So as her final words, She told Kiriyama to just keep being the cool guy she knew and loved. Then suddenly, Kiriyama felt Ruru's grip on his hand weaken and slip away. It was at that moment he realized that, for the first time in his life, he fucked up. He was powerless to save Ruru, and all he could do was cry it out inside the room they had shared. Now, his breakwater, Ruru, was gone. Kiriyama believed he had become strong and invincible because Ruru had been by his side. And now that she was gone, nothing held back the ocean of fear and anxiety that could now drown him completely. In this imagery, we see him crying into the scarf that once belonged to his late love, Ruru. As time passed, Kiriyama's hair gradually turned gray, and he began to struggle with sleep due to depression. Without realizing it, he had become a coward, far from the brave person he once was. Back in the present, Kiriyama realized that it was that exact day when everything had changed for him. And as he remained lost in self-reflection, we see the slender Managuri, shriveling its head and preparing to strike. Its target was Sazanami, who lay motionless on the ground. It curled its morphed tentacle head tightly to increase the piercing power of its attack. Yet even now, Kiriyama remained stuck, battling his own cowardice from within the chest he was hiding in. But just as the slender Managuri unleashed its razor-sharp tentacle head to kill Sazanami once and for all, Kiriyama suddenly heard Ruru's final words echo inside his mind. At that moment, he remembered and realized that for the sake of their love, he had to keep being the cool guy Ruru had always known. The slender Managuri struck, but it only hit the floor. Sazanami was no longer there. From the opposite side of the shattered wall, we see that Kiriyama had managed to save Sazanami just in time and had whisked her away at incredible speed. Kiriyama said that if Ruru saw him now in his current state, she'd be terribly disappointed. He also thought about how embarrassing it was that Sazanami had gone so far just to save his life. So now, Kiriyama gently laid Sazanami's body down onto the floor. He said that what happened was unacceptable. If he ever saw Ruru again, he'd be too ashamed to face her because of the cowardice he had shown. He wouldn't be able to say he remained the cool guy she once loved. So now, Kiriyama made a promise to himself. He would do everything it takes to become stronger and to become a hero. As he declared this, his entire body trembled, and he placed his right hand over his chest as a vow. We also noticed that the scarf he was wearing was the very same scarf that once belonged to Ruru. The slender Managuri now raised its right arm, ready to launch its next attack. Kiriyama admitted that he was still scared and that his heart ached, which is why he held his chest. But he had no choice. So he clenched his fist and bit his thumb to draw blood. In his mind, he told himself that everything would be alright. And even if it wasn't, he'd force it to be. From the wound, blood began to pour, and from that blood, an arm emerged. Next, the blood formed itself into the shape of Ruru. Kiriyama spoke to the Ruru figure that emerged from his blood and apologized for showing his shameful side for so long. But he still wanted her to stay by his side. In response, Ruru moved behind him and embraced him. Kiriyama confessed to Ruru and reaffirmed that he truly was powerless without her. Upon hearing this, Ruru hugged him even tighter. Then, when Kiriyama told Ruru to sink in, he suddenly groaned from the violent surge of Oni blood coursing through his entire body like veins or vines. After that, he began to feel all his fear fading away. This was Kiriyama's blood eclipse release ability, known as Dance of the Cold Ashes. His clothes transformed into Oni blood clothing, and he was now equipped with a fan weapon. He took a stance and was visibly excited to fight. The slender Managuri used both its arms to restrain and attack Kiriyama. But Kiriyama quickly executed a move. With just a snap, a burst of Oni blood scattered into the air. The blood droplets transformed into leaf-shaped forms midair. Kiriyama had precise control over his Oni blood, and he made the leaf-shaped blades swirl around him using his fan. Then, he held the fan in front of his face and said, "Let's dance." With his attack, Shizakura, Storm of the Dancing Blades, he dashed and stopped instantly at the far end of the room. He had moved so quickly that he passed the slender Managuri before it even realized. Then, we see that Kiriyama had already severed both of its arms. His ability, the Dance of the Cold Ashes, uses Oni blood to form a whirlwind of tiny blades. Once the user begins to dance, each blade resembles a sakura petal that slices through the enemy. Arrogantly, Kiriyama asked the slender Maniguri what those dancing blades tasted like. Then, we see a memory of Kiriyama bravely diving off high cliffs into deep waters. His courage had returned, just like before. Confidently, he shouted at Aguri to come at him, because now he was invincible. Kiriyama felt as though his body was incredibly light, knowing that his beloved Ruru was with him. He seemed completely fearless. He thought she was amazing while fighting the Aguri in front of him. It brought back memories of summer festivals where they would always dance together. He truly loved dancing with Ruru. Even now, he remembered those moments when they would practice until the sun went down. He knew he never was invincible, and that he was only pretending to be. Back in the present, the Aguri kicked at him, but he dodged quickly. He was sure Ruru saw all of that. And even so, he believed he was strong and cool. Using the sakura blade petals formed from his blood, he managed to slice the Aguri's leg. He leaped into the air, thinking to himself how incredibly kind she really was. He readied his stance and launched into the dance of the festive couple attack. He and the figure of his deceased ex still held folding fans in their hands. Soon, he landed a clean cut across the Aguri's neck right in front of him. In his mind, if Ruru truly believed in the words he spoke, then it didn't matter if everything was a pretense. He could still declare them with pride. The sakura petals made from his blood continued to float in the air, and he imagined Ruru was watching him. He fell to his knees, grinning from ear to ear at what had just happened. He asked her if she thought he was the coolest of them all. The scene shifted to the garden, where Shiki and Mei were. He asked if she was okay and if she was scared. The child replied that her mother and father were already dead. Because of that, she said she didn't care if she died too. Shiki couldn't believe she actually wanted to disappear as well. Maybe that was one way to react to what had happened, but he insisted that she must not die. If she died too, then everything her parents went through would be for nothing. Shiki advised her not to give up on a future where she could smile again. He repeatedly told her to live on and to keep fighting. Mei became curious and asked what he meant by fighting. He clarified that she should fight against despair. And to do that, the only thing she could do for now was to cheer for them. Shiki said he would fight too. He promised to destroy the ones who stole her parents away from her. And if ever she decided that she truly wanted to live, then at that moment, she should tell him to do his best from the bottom of her heart. Shiki stood up, prompting Mei to ask if he was leaving. He thought she would be safe if she just stayed hidden there. But Mei said it was impossible for him to win. However, Shiki insisted that he would win, though he admitted he couldn't say that for sure. And even if the situation was hopeless, he no longer cared. He cracked his knuckles and said he would not back down no matter what happened. That was what he believed in right now. In another location, someone was calling out Mudano's name. Upon hearing them, Mudano slowly opened his eyes. He was lying on top of some rubble. His companions were relieved to see that he was awake. When he asked how long he had been unconscious, they replied that it had been 15 minutes. Mudano grew concerned when he heard that and immediately tried to get up. One of his companions lowered their head and apologized. If Mudano hadn't protected them, he would have been more than capable of handling the situation on his own. Mudano told them not to worry about that anymore. For now, they needed to keep moving. They asked him where he was planning to go in that condition. He answered that he was going to Kayomizudera because that was where his students were. Beneath the Kayamiza temple, Tsubakiri sat waiting. While he was just lounging there, the sliding door suddenly opened and he asked who it was. It turned out to be Shiki, who said that based on his clothes, he could tell he was a Momotaro. He asked if he was Tsubakiri, but instead of answering, Tsubakiri asked him who he was. Shiki introduced himself as Ichinose Shiki and declared that he was the one who would destroy the Momotaro. Without a trace of fear, he stood alone in that room to face Tsubakiri. Tsubakiri was surprised to hear that this was the Shiki he had heard of. He confirmed that yes, he was Tsubakiri. And Shiki was right. He immediately asked why he was doing that. Tsubakiri was curious what he meant. What Shiki wanted to know was why he was desecrating the bodies of the dead. He thought of Mei's parents. Shiki admitted he couldn't understand it. What kind of person would do something like that? Tsubakiri seemed puzzled by his words, then suddenly burst out laughing. He said that was a very human thing to say. That kind of line, he added, was reserved only for those who had rights. And by that, he meant humans and Momotaro only. He told him not to go thinking that someone like him, and Oni, had those rights too. Shiki was seething with rage as he heard this. He told him to shut up and threatened to blow him apart until there was nothing left. Shiki had fully snapped from anger and pointed his gun directly at the heartless Momotaro in front of him. Meanwhile, the group of Oni, along with Mudano, made their way toward their Kyoto branch. However, what greeted them was a completely sealed-off underground. They began to wonder if that was the doing of the Momotaro they fought earlier. It seemed that all entry and exit points had been sealed. Given the situation, they thought maybe Mudano could just break through it. But Mudano replied that Kayomizudoro was directly above them, and it was packed with tourists. If he were to break the barrier, it could affect the foundation and cause a collapse. As a result, it would trigger a major incident. One of them expressed concern, saying evacuation might now be impossible. The Momotaro threat was one thing, but this was something they could no longer control. Mudano began thinking carefully about how they could solve this. Suddenly, someone called out to him, calling him sensei. It was Yusurube, out of breath, telling him that they had managed to scope out the enemy, which allowed them to evacuate most of the people. Mudano said that he was starting to understand the situation. Yusurube then asked what else they could do now. Mudano said the top priority was to evacuate the tourists before attempting to break the seal. Just then, someone interrupted and called Mudano's attention. He said he had seen the woman he was holding was talking to herself outside. He asked if Mudano knew her. It was Bialbugora, who was on the verge of tears. She was apologizing, saying she only wanted to see the sights of Kyoto. She begged them for mercy. Mudano was shocked to see she had followed them. When the man realized Mudano knew her, he apologized to Bialbugora. She said she only wanted to help. Yusurube then appeared from behind Mudano, grinning. He was delighted to see Bialbugora Homare there. He introduced himself and said he was 16 years old and that it was nice to meet her. He then blurted out that his dream was to date a girl in uniform and go to her house so he could finally graduate from being a virgin. Bialbugora was completely caught off guard by that statement. Yusurube quickly took it back and even suggested that they should go ahead and do that now. He asked what she thought. Bialbugora was unable to respond. Mudano told him to cut it out with the nonsense. But Yusurube insisted that this was an important topic. He said it was every healthy teenage boy's dream. In Mudano's thoughts, he realized that he had assumed this kid was a straightforward, well-mannered one, but it turned out he was still a bit immature. Mudano apologized to Bialbugora, saying it looked like they were going to need her help. But before he could finish what he was about to say, he suddenly stopped. When Yusurube asked what was wrong, Mudano realized that there might be a way for them to evacuate everyone from Kayomizudoro. On the other side, Kugisaki was facing Yomogi, who asked if he was looking for something there. Was it the corpse of a Kaki Oni? She said. Kugisaki was confused when she mentioned a corpse. Yomogi explained that her senpai, Tsubakiri, already took care of him. He didn't respond to her comment. This made Yomogi wonder if he was angry or something. She said it was irritating to think about Oni being all buddy-buddy. Kugisaki clarified that it wasn't like that. He had no interest in anything beyond his own goals. Still, Yomogi noted that despite what he said, he seemed more than ready to kill someone. Kugisaki replied that it was because there was a Momotaro standing right in front of him. He threatened to kill all of them. He then opened a stitch in his arm to draw blood. Meanwhile, Yomogi released her bacteria, saying that they would wipe out every single one of his Oni friends. Kugisaki began manipulating his blood using the Blood Eclipse release. He prepared to activate the blood of the Seven Sanctions. As a result, a saw-like weapon emerged from his arm. It was explained that Kugisaki Jin's blood of the Seven Sanctions was a technique where he used each of his scars to create weapons. He swiftly launched an attack against Yomogi with it, but she suddenly disappeared from where she had been standing. Kugisaki sensed that something was wrong. Yomogi then spoke, saying it was too bad, but that wasn't nearly enough to kill her. She had created a door and used it to escape. Kugisaki responded by calling her out, daring her to bring it on. The scene shifted to a room inside the Kyoto branch. Blood covered the surroundings, and Shiki had his gun pointed directly at Tsubakiri. However, in defense, Tsubakiri hurled a knife straight at his hand, causing him to drop the gun and send it clattering to the floor. Tsubakiri mocked him, saying that he must be joking if he thought he could compete with him. Did he really not realize that his blood had even greater potential? Shiki cut him off, saying he had no idea what he was talking about, but not to worry about that. He hated him, after all. From the blood spilling from the cut on his palm, Shiki formed a massive assault rifle. He declared that he had made up his mind and was going to blow him away with everything he had. He remembered the conversation he had earlier with Mei and grew frustrated at how his reaction and at how Mudano told him that he still couldn't control his blood properly. He forced himself to silence those thoughts. Who even cared about all that anymore? Just as planned, he fired the rifle he had created, catching Tsubakiri off guard. The explosion it caused was massive, blowing apart the walls of the building. Doors and debris flew in every direction. Tsubakiri managed to dodge and took a new stance. In his mind, he hadn't expected that. Shiki taunted him, wondering why he's running. Was he scared of what he just did? He said he wasn't going to back down easily. Tsubakiri responded sarcastically, but he was impressed by the weapon Shiki had created. Because of that, he said he had become even more interested. He lifted what he had been carrying and said that now he was going all out. When he opened the lid, Shiki was surprised to realize it was a coffin. Back on the other side of the underground, Yomogi slammed the ground with her hand, and as a result, several pillar-like structures emerged from below. Kugisaki instinctively stepped back, knowing it would be dangerous to approach. He decided to observe her ability from a distance for now. However, he hadn't anticipated that there was already a trap set behind him. By the time he realized it, a door opened behind him and he fell through it. Yomogi was pleased, saying that without her permission, he would not be able to escape. There was nothing else he could do now. Inside the trap, Kugisaki pounded on the door. He was alarmed because it was pitch dark and he couldn't see anything. Yomogi moved her finger. Now, she said, it was time for her to have fun. With the movement of her finger, the space around Kugisaki began to squeeze inward. He grew nervous as the walls started closing in tighter and tighter. Yomogi asked how small he thought his body would become before he was crushed to death by that box. She wanted him to feel it for himself. Kugisaki insisted that he would just break out, but Yomogi was confident that wouldn't happen. She knew that an Oni needed full control of their concentration and emotional state to manipulate their blood. She said he shouldn't expect to achieve that. The brain, she said, didn't work the way they wanted when trapped in a confined space, especially when that space was gradually shrinking. Because of the slow compression of the room, Kugisaki had already fallen to his knees inside. If he couldn't use his blood manipulation in there, she was certain he would be crushed and die. Kugisaki focused and closed his eyes. He remembered when he was a child, lying inside the narrow air ducts of an abandoned building. From inside the box, Kugisaki spoke and said that the feeling was familiar. Yomogi was surprised he could still respond. Then a strange sound began coming from within the place where she had trapped him. She wondered what was happening inside. She realized it sounded like blades. She began to question whether he had managed to use his blood after all, but she was sure it was impossible for him to stay calm and focused in such a tight space. The dark room where he was hidden began to crack little by little, and eventually it shattered, allowing him to escape. Yomogi's eyes widened in shock, completely unprepared for that outcome. Kugisaki explained that there were times when he would just sleep inside the ducts of an abandoned building. The place was filthy and stank. Compared to that, he said, this box wasn't so bad. Impressively, he had managed to form several different weapons from his blood, which were now visible emerging from behind him. Yomogi, frustrated by what had happened, called him a brat. Suddenly, someone appeared out of nowhere, surprising both Kugisaki and Yomogi. He dropped Inaguri's severed head and asked if they really thought they could defeat him using that small fry. It was Yaroshi who asked just how weak they thought he was. He was visibly irritated. He stretched his body and said he wanted to blow off some steam so he would handle things from here. Kugisaki told him not to get involved, but Yaroshi refused to accept that. He said not to tell him what to do. He was so pissed off, he said, that he was going to kill the Momotaro right there. He pointed at Yomogi, but was caught off guard when he noticed her voluptuous figure. He asked what was up with her outfit, saying it was far too revealing. Still, he claimed he didn't care anymore. He told her to wear something decent and called her an idiot. He said he was even more annoyed now because of how much skin she was showing. He bit his finger to draw blood for combat and was curious what would happen next. Blood dripped from his hand onto the floor, and from there, something began to grow upward. Yomogi was confident that fighting those two brats wouldn't be a problem. She touched the floor again to create boxes from it. She declared she'd take them both down in one go. From the other side, Yaoroshi said she was way too slow. Fearlessly, he faced her head-on, and in an instant, he vanished from her sight. Then, he suddenly reappeared right in front of her, which caught Yomogi off guard. He launched a powerful kick that slightly grazed Yomogi's chin. She managed to retreat in time to save herself. In her thoughts, she realized he had nearly hit her right in the neck. Yaoroshi was annoyed that he missed. He activated his blood eclipse release, hot-blooded hysteria, which caused his blood to form boots that wrapped around his legs. Yaoroshi was stunned by what had come out. Hot-blooded hysteria was a technique that used the Oni's anger to generate random gear. Even the user never knew what kind of weapon would emerge. Its power depended on the intensity of the user's anger, and it could only be used 3 times a day. Yaoroshi hadn't expected boots to be the result this time. Seeing that he was a speed type, Yomogi knew this was a bad matchup for her. Suddenly, the area began to tremble, making them all curious about what was happening. The underground began to gradually collapse, and they all looked upward. Yaoroshi grew irritated by the shaking of the place. Going back to before the earthquake occurred, Mudano had stepped out along with Bialbugora. She asked her teacher where they were now. Mudano, speaking to Yusuru Bei on speakerphone, told him to prepare to report on the situation from his side. Yusuru Bei said he understood, but he still didn't get the plan. Mudano explained thereon, they would cause a small earthquake that would trigger a landslide. As a result, everyone would be forced to evacuate. They were shocked upon hearing this plan. Mudano continued his explanation, saying that they were currently at the foot of the mountain by Kiyomizutara's Amida Hall. It was the perfect place to start. The group asked if he was referring to starting a landslide. Mudano added that, of course, it would be a small one to ensure no one got hurt. If it were just an earthquake, people would simply gather in the nearest open area. But if it was a landslide, they would have to evacuate to somewhere much farther away. When that happens, he should signal the troops to evacuate everyone at once. That kind of large-scale commotion would surely make people feel how urgent the situation really was. The group responded with a Roger after hearing the instructions. Mudano then ordered Yusuru Bei to confirm whether everyone in the vicinity had been evacuated. Yusuru Bei asked how they were supposed to cause the earthquake. Mudano said he would have Bialbugora summon her titan for that purpose. That alone would be more than enough for what they needed. Bialbugora couldn't believe what she was hearing. She refused, saying it was impossible and she couldn't do it. Mudano told her not to worry, he was there after all. But Bialbugora was afraid she would only end up being a burden again. Mudano wasn't pleased when she said she still couldn't control herself. So instead, he told Yusuru Bei that they would change the plan. Yusuru Bei was surprised to hear that, and asked what they were going to do now. Mudano replied that they would just have to think of something else. Time was running out, and the situation of those trapped underground remained dangerous. Bialbugora grew anxious when she heard that. Mudano looked at her, and suddenly said she was expelled. She didn't expect that at all. Mudano explained that he didn't need someone who wasn't even useful here. He turned around and began to walk away. Bialbugora couldn't accept it, and asked if that wasn't a terrifying thing to do. She said it was horrifying to let a rampaging titan loose when she couldn't control it. Mudano replied that being afraid wasn't the problem, it was her refusal to change herself. He said he already knew her past and the incident she had caused. But just like him, everyone had their own burdens. Still, they came to Resetsu carrying something they wanted to change. He glanced at Bialbugora and asked her what exactly she came to Resetsu for. Bialbugora couldn't answer immediately. She stuttered before finally responding, now in tears, that she came because she wanted to control her own blood. Mudano replied that her blood belonged only to her, and that was something that would never change. This made Bialbugora ask if that meant she was the one who needed to change. Because of her teacher's words, Bialbugora reflected deeply and suddenly bit her finger. She drew out blood and declared that she wanted to change. Her blood scattered, while on the other end of the line, Yusuru Bei asked what their next move was. Mudano remained silent as he observed Bialbugora's transformation. From her shadow, a massive titan began to emerge. Mudano then responded, saying it looked like they were going back to the original plan. The titan attacked Mudano, who quickly leaped out of the way but the ground was destroyed in the process. Bialbugora became worried because of what had just happened. However, her teacher assured her that it was fine. Thanks to that, everyone had felt what seemed like an earthquake. The tremor reached Kiyomizu Temple, where many tourists were gathered. They thought the earthquake felt a bit strong. As a result, the ground gave way. Several Oni members near the temple said this was going to turn into a landslide, so everyone needed to evacuate immediately. Upon hearing that, the people began to panic, realizing the danger. The Oni members shouted for them to run as quickly and safely as possible. They warned everyone to be careful or else they would get hurt. They hurried the crowd away from the area. In the midst of the panic, the tourists followed. Yusurube used his ability to detect the locations of the people. He reported to Mudano once he believed the evacuation was complete. Mudano commended Bialbugora with a well done as he stood atop the Titan's hand. When she motioned for him to step back, Mudano jumped down and managed to put his student to sleep. In a single moment, he dispelled the Titan created by her blood and gently laid his student down. Bialbugora apologized, saying she wasn't able to be useful. In Mudano's thoughts, he knew there was a deep darkness inside her and that his ability to help was limited. Even so, he was certain that someone out there would be able to pull her out of that darkness. That, he thought, was what their school was for. As he supported Bialbugora, he told her she did a good job. Then he instructed the troops to head out, saying he would leave Bialbugora in their care. He headed straight back underground, hoping that the Kiyomizu Temple could remain intact for as long as possible. But Mudano knew for certain that their branch would collapse along with it. He quietly admitted it would feel lonely once the Kyoto branch was gone. Still, he reminded himself there was nothing more important than a life. He pricked his finger and used his blood to break the seal below. Once again, he activated Torrential Rebirth, summoning a small army of blood puppet archers. While hovering midair, Thai positioned their arrows precisely at the barrier. With that coordinated strike, the seal began to shatter. Soon enough, the protective barrier blocking access to the Kyoto branch completely broke down. Mudano then warned his team that they only had a short amount of time before the entire branch collapsed. Their top priority was to rescue as many people as they could. If they encountered any of Tsubakiri's men, they were to retreat immediately. His team followed closely behind him, charging into the ruins to locate and save their comrades. Back inside, due to the quake and resulting landslide, the noise had started to irritate Tsubakiri. Before him lay the bloodied Shiki. And so Tsubakiri said it was about time to start changing things little by little. But first, he declared, he would quickly kill off the remaining Oni inside before taking Shiki home. In the next scene, we return to the past, where Tsubakiri opened the box he was carrying after declaring that he would go all out. It surprised Shiki to see that it was a coffin, and Tsubakiri pointed at him at that moment. And from that coffin emerged a person, wearing the exact same clothes as Tsubakiri. The only difference was the man's face. He had a blank expression, short spiky hair, and a scar on his forehead. Shiki immediately noticed the man's clothing, and with a hint of shock, realized that this man was a Momotaro. He was stunned that Tsubakiri would turn his own allies into puppets, so he asked him if he was out of his mind, but Tsubakiri gave no answer, and only let out a sigh. Then he called Shiki an idiot, who was annoyed that he could not understand why he was being called an idiot. He explained that an idiot is someone who blindly follows their beliefs about what is right and just. He then said that when a virus spreads, there are always people who will complain and dismiss it as just a cold, or those who refuse to eat any animal products while carelessly setting the livestock free. Having personal beliefs is not idiocy, he said, but forcing those beliefs onto others is. He added that just so Shiki would know that this person wanted to become his puppet, and that puppet had already done something with its hands, which suddenly caused Shiki to kneel down, completely unaware of what was happening. Shiki was in shock as his entire body suddenly grew heavy, and Tsubakiri said that it was an ability of his puppet. He then explained that if he could control a Momotaro, he also gained access to their abilities. This particular man had an ability that allowed him to mix his bacteria with the oxygen in the air and manipulate air pressure. As he said this, the puppet began to speak, declaring that he must wipe out the Oni. Shiki was shocked that the puppet could suddenly talk, and Tsubakiri said he was surprised too. because those were the only words the man could remember from when he was alive. He called that deep-seated grudge and tenacity a splendid Momotaro spirit. He added that with him in control of such a wonderful spirit, doesn't Shiki think that they can finally fulfill the puppet's dreams? And as he said this, he demonstrated what he could do with the puppet. He also asked Shiki how long he could endure all this pressure, as it was clear that Shiki was already struggling, blood now dripping from his nose and mouth. Next, we moved to the tunnel, which was starting to crack. Because of this, Yoroshi asked Kugisaki if the tunnel was going to collapse on them. At that moment, he heard footsteps behind him and angrily asked what that was. Yomogi was also irritated by the approaching group, which was led by someone wearing roller skates. It was none other than Mudano, who had brought additional combat-ready Oni. He told Yomogi that she would not escape this time, surprising the two of his students who saw that he had already arrived. Yoroshi said that they were just getting to the good part, so Mudano should not interfere, while Yomogi let out a deep sigh. Then Yomogi knelt down and released a large amount of black bacteria behind her, shocking all the Oni. She asked who had said she was planning to escape, because what she saw in front of her was just a bunch of sad Oni, so what would she run from? She was a Momotaro, and her purpose was to annihilate all the Oni. And as she said this, she removed her blazer. With an extremely angry expression on her face, she declared that this would be the end for the Oni. Then we returned to the room where Tsubakiri, his puppet, and Shiki were. Tsubakiri commented that it was getting very noisy outside, and he asked if it wasn't at the time to change things up a bit, but Shiki could not answer, still struggling under the puppet's ability. At that moment, Shiki finally collapsed, breaking free from the control of the puppet and Tsubakiri. He thought that it looks like the puppet could not cover the whole area. Tsubakiri said that perhaps he had gone too easy on him this time. At that moment, Shiki used his blood erosion release and summoned a giant M4. He told Tsubakiri to wipe that smug look off his face and fired a powerful blast at him with the summoned M4. However, Tsubakiri easily deflected the shot using his puppet's powers, and he told Shiki that it was useless to fight gravity, which surprised Shiki. Tsubakiri added that incidentally, his puppet could also condense the oxygen in the air between its hands, increasing its pressure by 100 times. He told Shiki to imagine a circle and compress the air, which was exactly what his puppet had done. It was a ball of compressed oxygen weighing several hundred tons, almost as heavy as a wrecking ball, though slightly different. As he explained this, he pointed his fingers at Shiki, triggering the puppet to hurl the compressed ball of air at the Oni student. Shiki watched in horror as the ball of compressed air came toward him. Too shocked to react or defend himself, it struck him directly. So he felt the tremendous weight and pressure of the ball and did not understand what was happening to him. Tsubakiri said that all of that immense pressure would strike at the point of impact, cracking Shiki's bones, and that the impact would subject his internal organs to several hundred Gs of pressure. His heart then compressed, causing him to choke and vomit blood. His rib cage was completely crushed by the compressed ball of air, and Tsubakiri added that it would also crush him from the inside. Shiki collapsed, screaming in pain, as his veins began to bulge. Tsubakiri remarked that it was quite the letdown. To think that Shiki was the famous child of the Kishin, mocking how easy he had been to defeat, as he called it a joke. Shiki was confused about what Tsubakiri had said about the Kishin, clearly surprised that he did not know about it. Tsubakiri explained that the Kishin were once the most infamous and powerful Oni commanders in history, and that flowing through Shiki's veins was the blood of that lineage, making him the child of the Kishin. In the next scene, we moved to Japan's Tokyo Tower, and there was a man with a scar covering half of his face. He went to an elevator and pressed level 2, but the elevator took him down to basement level 22. The elevator quickly descended to basement level 22, and when the doors opened, he entered a large room where people thanked him for his work that day. We learned that he is Samidare, and his face was like that because of his previous battle with Shiki. He ignored the people who greeted him and simply walked quietly to his intended destination. But one person thanking him caught his attention. It was a woman wearing glasses with a curvy figure who introduced herself as Mamoto Hina and said that she had just been transferred to headquarters starting that day. She said she was pleased to meet Samidare and that it would be an honor to accompany him, but Samidare told her that she could drop the formalities. Mamoda Hina commented that the headquarters was very impressive, to think that it was located directly beneath Tokyo Tower. She added that she would get to see many powerful people, and as she said this, Samidare was heading to the locker room. He apologized, saying he did not do well with people and preferred to work alone. Hina was surprised, since according to regulations, they had to work in pairs, so because of this, she said she would be reprimanded severely. She added that she was already close to being reprimanded as it is because she was a slow learner, and as she said this, Samidare came out of the locker room, already changed clothes. Hina then said that she had heard something about the child of Kishin, and since she had just been transferred, she did not understand it yet, so she asked what exactly it was. Samidare explained that the Kishin were Oni who had nearly wiped out the Momotaro Corporation, and that those Oni had given rise to descendants who they called the children of the Kishin. He added that it was said the Kishin had done everything in their power to spread their seed to as many women as possible, which made Hina call them playboys. Then she asked, was it not odd that if the Kishin were so concerned about spreading their bloodline, wouldn't the Kishin children not be widespread by now? Samidare replied that to be precise, only those who inherited the strength and power of the Kishin heritage were called the children of the Kishin. Hina understood that he meant there were Oni who had not inherited the power of their ancestors, and it is more likely that those are the majority. Samidare then said that interestingly enough, they had discovered that these children were born under specific circumstances, so Hina asked what those were. Another man spoke up, saying that the brats with Kishin powers only started to appear when the Momotaro were about to defeat the Oni. Hina was surprised by the arrival of the man and seemed to recognize him. The man introduced himself as one of the commanding officers of the 13 units, Momoiwa Shinya, and told Hina to remember his name. Hina thanked him for his hard work, but he only gave her a cold response. Because of this, Hina thought he was a scary person. In addition, she realized that the Momotaro Corporation had many ranks, and it would be hard to remember all of them, which made her tear up. According to the organizational chart of the Momotaro Corporation, the Great Emperor sat at the top, followed by the Emperor. Under the Emperor were the 3 branches of 3 emperors, and under them were the 3 branches of General Commanding Officers, which included Samidare. Under them were the 13 units commanding officers, which included Shinya and Tsubakiri, and one more unit under that consisted of 16 deputy commanding officers, which included Yamogi and Hina, and at the very bottom were the troops. Shinya then asked Hina if she understood why the war between the Oni and Momotaros had lasted so long for how many millennia. However, Hina could not answer, so Shinya told her to answer faster and called her a numbskull, which made Hina think that Shinya was oozing with abuse of power. Shinya explained that the Kishin first appeared when the Oni ancestors faced oppression, calling them damn brats who just suddenly manifested. Since that time, the timing of finding Kishin power manifestation has been largely the same in Oni that share that bloodline, which was why the war never ended. If only the Kishin stopped appearing, the Oni would have been wiped out long ago. Now, the Oni hid themselves among humans, continually gaining more knowledge and wisdom. He then asked if Hina at least understood why living among humans is a problem, while Hina, tearing up, disliked Shinya because he was so self-important. She then said that their duty as Momotaro was to protect people from the Oni. That, among other things, was why the existence of either side should not be revealed to the public, and she was about to add that it was wrong to live among humans. But before she could finish, Shinya called her stupid. According to him, their duty went far beyond that. So he asked if Hina was slow, which made her cry even more and want to go home. He added that it was inevitable for humans to get caught up in the battle between the Oni and Momotaro, which was why they needed connections with politicians to keep things on the down low. Because of this, politicians demanded medicine made from Oni blood, among other things. He said that if the Oni were not hiding among humans, they would not need to cooperate with politicians. Samidare interjected, telling Shinya not to raise his voice so much because he was sure Hina already understood. Hina was pleased with Samidare, and she said that their collaboration with politicians was for the purpose of protecting the human population, after all, but Shinya asked if she was stupid. He said that obviously, the politicians only helped them because they expected preferential treatment regarding their own safety, so he told Hina to be realistic. Hina then looked at Samidare as if asking for help. Shinya then teasingly said it must be hard for someone like Samidare to be partnered with a newbie like Hina, and he added that being said, it was Shiki who had caused him to need an artificial arm, and was it not true that there was no helping it? He said that Samidare had to step down from fieldwork and become a trainer because of that, and he thought the higher-ups had given him a hint. He wanted Samidare to step down from his position, but Samidare gave no answer, only thinking silently. Meanwhile, Hina thought things were getting messy and wished she could go back to the sticks because it was a warm place and her co-workers there were so kind. Then Shinya stood up and said that if he killed the Kishin brat, Shiki, he would get promoted anyway. Samidare replied that Shinya could do whatever he wanted with the other Kishin children, but he himself would kill Ichinose Shiki. Shinya then asked if he was trying to get revenge for his scar, or if he was just trying to tie up a loose end. Samidare gave no answer, while Hina asked if Shiki wasn't the only child of the Kishin, to which Samidare replied that there isn't only one. Then we returned to where Shiki was, and Tsubakiri said that there have always been 8 Kishin children born at any one time, and Shiki was one of them. It would be a problem if the Kishin power inside him awakened, but it would also be a problem if they killed him. It's not like all they do is kill all their enemies, because they were valuable research subjects, so Shiki would become their living guinea pig from now on. He added that it did not matter to him as long as Shiki was alive, so he would just beat him half to death before bringing him back. Because of this, Shiki told him to shut up and was already standing as he said it. Tsubakiri, in a sarcastic tone, said that the Oni regeneration never ceased to amaze him, and the Momotaro had nothing like that, so it kinda makes him jealous. Meanwhile, Shiki said that he doesn't care about the Kishin bullcrap that Tsubakiri talked about, and all he needed to do was to beat him. Besides that, he needed to make him pay for what he had done to the other Oni. So he once again pulled out his giant M4 and fired 3 powerful shots at Tsubakiri and his puppet. However, the two easily dodged, and as they did so, Tsubakiri observed Shiki, who seemed to already be struggling greatly as he put up a brave front, and asked if that was all he had left and if he had run out of bullets. At that moment, Shiki's body seemed to weaken again, and he wondered why, until he completely collapsed. He thought that he could no longer move and that his guns were not coming out. Then Tsubakiri said that with that kind of firepower and concentration, it was only natural for Shiki to exhaust his blood, which reminded Shiki of what Mudano had said about him not yet having proper control over his blood, which pissed him off more. Tsubakiri added that even a child of the Kishin was a sitting duck if they could not use their blood, and out of nowhere, he mentioned that the place was ready to collapse. Then he said they should finish it and used his puppet's power to completely crush Shiki. At that moment, Shiki called him stupid, and he said that it looked like he would not be able to go any further, and next would be killing the child outside the room. He was referring to Mei, who was shocked and confused by this, which made Shiki worry about her. A mixture of shock and fear filled Mei's face as Tsubakiri mentioned that he was going to kill her, while Shiki told Mei to get out of there, his face filled with anger, which was visible as he gritted his teeth. Tsubakiri responded that he would not let a single Oni escape, but suddenly his expression changed into one of puzzlement. This was because Mei had asked him if that was how he had killed her mother and father. Tsubakiri then asked who Mei was referring to, because he did not pay attention to each maggot he killed, so he would not remember. Mei told him that he was incredibly cruel, because her parents had done nothing wrong and were very loving. However, Tsubakiri refused to believe that an Oni could have a loving family, and he even got goosebumps just imagining such a thing. At that moment, Shiki told Tsubakiri to shut up and told Mei to hurry and get out of there. Upon hearing Mei's name, Tsubakiri immediately jogged his memory and asked if Mei's parents were the bald, bearded man and his wife. Because of that, both Mei and Shiki were shocked, and Tsubakiri added that he remembered them mentioning Mei's name and that it was hilarious to watch them screaming for dear life. He said the two were groveling, begging him to let their child live with their heads to the dirt. That, he said, was the reason he had allowed Mei to escape. Then, when her parents had a look of relief on their faces, he told them something that made their faces change completely. He told them he would kill them first, and he would make sure their child would die the same way. He told them to imagine their precious child desperately running away alone, only to die in the end. After hearing this, Mei suddenly collapsed to her knees in extreme shock, and Tsubakiri further added that he told her parents to imagine her face at the moment she would die, the final moment when she would cry out for her mother and father. In her dying moments, he said, they would not be able to hold her hand, and he mockingly added that they should not think that Oni had the right to die with dignity, all while wearing a sinister expression. Mei began sobbing uncontrollably because of what she had just heard about what Tsubakiri had said to her parents about how he would kill her, while Shiki shouted out in anger, obviously frustrated. Both Tsubakiri and Mei turned toward him, and he told Mei not to give Tsubakiri the satisfaction of seeing her cry. He said he would mourn with her after he defeated the Momotaro puppeteer, so she should not cry just yet, and as he said this, Tsubakiri started to wonder how Shiki was still able to stand. He added that until he defeated Tsubakiri, Mei should not cry alone, and at that moment, Shiki himself began to cry. Tsubakiri laughed at him and asked why he was crying, because he did not get it at all. Shiki told Tsubakiri to shut up and said he was crying because he had a heart. He truly thought about turning away from Mei's suffering, because he understood it too well. Then, he called out to Mei, and he empathized with her, having just recently lost someone important to him as well. He also said that because he had a heart, he could understand the pain that Mei was feeling, the regret her parents had, and that was why tears were flowing from his eyes. The one who could not understand that, he said, was the true demon, Tsubakiri. He didn't seem to like what Shiki said, and he said that he would not listen to an Oni talking about having a heart. So he used his puppet's powers on Shiki again. He said he would crush him along with his filthy heart, since it only seems fitting. As he said this, he applied tremendous pressure on Shiki's body to literally crush him, causing the Oni student to scream in pain as blood splat out from his nose and mouth, and veins bulged out from his body. Tsubakiri added that Shiki should watch closely, as he slowly crushed Mei with pressure, aiming at the girl, who was shocked at what the Momotaro puppeteer was about to do to her. Shiki told Tsubakiri not to do it, and in his heart, he regretted not being able to save his father because, at that time, his mind and body had not been strong enough, and even now, he thought he could finally fight. At that moment, Tsubakiri laughed at him and said he could not use his powers anymore because his blood was drained, but Shiki thought to himself that he would not leave any regrets behind. He knew he didn't have that much power left in him, but he begged for the strength to save Mei, and as he did, a spark appeared at the tip of his finger where a small amount of blood emerged. After that, his body was suddenly surrounded by an incredibly powerful blazing blood aura, and Tsubakiri was shocked at what was happening. Then, we returned to the Momotaro headquarters beneath Tokyo Tower, where Hina was wondering how the powers of Kishin children were different from other Oni powers. Sami Dare explained that each Kishin child possessed an elemental attribute in addition to normal Oni powers. The 8 elemental powers were flame, ice, wind, earth, light, darkness, thunder, and water. From these 8 elements, each Kishin child would inherit one, making them very different from the others. Hina then asked if that was the case, what element Shiki had. Sami Dare replied that it was flames, and the Kishin of flames was called Anki. At that moment, Shiki was revealed to have summoned a large flaming M4 LMG, and his entire body was also on fire. He wondered what was happening to him. Within Tsubakiri's mind, he stood in shock as he witnessed the overwhelming power of the Kishin. Shiki couldn't quite grasp what was going on, but one thing was certain. With this power, he could keep fighting. Then, he told Tsubakiri not to jump to conclusions, because he was going to show him just how wrong he was. Shiki was now known as the child of the Kishin, Anki, and that it would be difficult to fight him at that moment. But his body was already about to give out, so it would probably be easy to crush him before he could regenerate. That was why he used his puppet's power once again to crush Shiki. However, his face was suddenly filled with shock when Shiki fired a shot that pierced through his shoulder, carrying with it an extremely powerful impact and flames. The entire room was soon engulfed in blazing flames because of it, and Shiki was shrouded in smoke. Meanwhile, Tsubakiri was in immense pain from the shot that pierced his shoulder, and on top of that, flames were now spreading from where Shiki's attack had landed. Tsubakiri was visibly worried, because Shiki was not supposed to have any blood left. So he realized that if this was what Anki could do with just a little blood, he was in serious trouble, because the opponent he was now facing had turned into a monster. As for Shiki, he was happy that he was still able to fight. But suddenly a throbbing sensation ran through his body, causing the smile to vanish from his face. He coughed up blood and did not know what was happening or why. Then his body collapsed, and his flames began to rage wildly. He panicked from the immense pain and because he could not control either his blood or his flames. Seeing this, Tsubikiri was pleased, realizing that it no longer mattered if Shiki's Kishin power had awakened, because in his current state, Shiki was severely injured and running on fumes. He mocked and taunted Shiki, saying he was just having bad luck that day. However, it would be a problem if he managed to let loose again, so he had no other choice. He decided he would simply return Shiki as a corpse, and once again poured immense pressure on him. Tsubikiri added that he would do this by increasing the pressure more and more, until Shiki seemed to lose consciousness. He called him such a nuisance, and said that lowly beings like Oni should not talk about family or love. He said they were nothing but bugs crawling in the shadows, and that death was a blessing for their pathetic existence. Then he told Mei that her parents had died a very undignified death, and that he would make sure she would die the same way. Suddenly, Shiki shouted at him to shut the hell up and asked what Mei's family had done to deserve that, since all they had wanted was to live peacefully. At that moment, Mei remembered how her parents had apologized to her because of the hardships of their constantly moving life, but she had told them that her life was not hard, because as long as they were with her, she was happy. Her parents had told her that what she knew was only a small and narrow world, but the world was much bigger than she could imagine. Shiki then added that was it not unacceptable to live such a wretched life, and asked if it was too much to ask for a taste of happiness. Tsubikiri shouted that Oni were not qualified to attain happiness, to which Shiki countered by asking who said they needed qualifications to be happy. Because of this, Mei remembered when she had asked her parents if it was really hopeless to want to be happy, and at that time, Shiki had told her that she should live with a smile on her face. He had told her to go to all the places she wanted to visit, and to see all the sights she wanted to see. Mei also remembered how her father had told her that there was no one in the world who was hopeless when it came to happiness, but she had asked if they were not being looked down on. Tsubikiri then said that Oni had no right to speak about ideals or about a future that lies for their race. He said he would crush Shiki with his ultimate move that he was preparing, an enormous compressed ball of air, while Shiki struggled to stand. Shiki managed to form a giant M4 LMG using his blood, and used it to counter the compressed ball of air that Tsubikiri and his puppet hurled at him. As this was happening, Tsubikiri asked what Shiki thought he could do with his summoned weapon, since he was completely spent and had no power left to create bullets. The compressed ball of air began to rattle, and Shiki told Mei that from that point on, her life would change for the better. He told her that she should find her own happiness, and that he would always cheer for her. He shouted this while crying blood, and Mei remembered how her father had told her that everything would be okay, because from that point on, she would surely meet all kinds of people, and surely there would be those who would cheer for her happiness. At that moment, she realized that person was Shiki, and she began to cry. Because of this, she shouted with all her strength for Shiki to do his very best. Her words of encouragement reached Shiki, and he smiled, signaling that she had given him everything he needed. At that moment, his flames burst out once again, shocking Tsubikiri, and his puppet began to catch fire. Tsubikiri said that it's time to end this fight, while Shiki told Mei that he would keep his end of the bargain. Cracks began to appear in the compressed ball of air. Seeing this, Tsubikiri could not believe what he was seeing, because Shiki was supposed to have no strength left, and what he was doing should have been impossible. Then Shiki thanked Mei while releasing the last of his strength through his flames. Meanwhile, Tsubikiri could not accept what was happening, and was completely burned by Shiki's flames along with his puppet. Shiki then said that Mei's voice had been so strong just now, and that he had truly felt her cheers, which had reached his heart. Because Tsubikiri experienced the intense heat of the Kishin fire, we are taken into a flashback about his life, and how he came to be the way he is. We see him in a lab coat smoking outside on a balcony. According to him, he only wanted to remain a researcher inside the Momotaro Corporation, and he had no interest in the death of others. Each day, his job was simply to dissect Oni, and he was already satisfied with that routine without needing to change anything. But everything changed for him when someone called out to him that fateful day. He was called by a man who offered him a job, and the person who recruited him was the very same man who would become his senpai. He was Mamobe Manaka. Tsubakiri hated him deeply. He barged into his life and turned it completely upside down. We also noticed that Manaka is the same man whose corpse is now being used by Tsubakiri as a special puppet weapon. Tsubakiri immediately rejected his job offer, but the very next day, he received an order from his superiors transferring him directly to Manaka's unit. In the end, he had no choice but to go and work under him. According to Tsubakiri's recollection, Manaka was a lively, strong, and passionate man. He had a kind of strength that came from the trust of his comrades. Every time Manaka killed an Oni, he would also offer a sincere prayer for them. But to Tsubakiri, this was incomprehensible. One day, during some downtime between missions, Tsubakiri opened up to Manaka about his life. When he was just a child, his parents were killed by Oni. From that moment on, he became cold, aware that he had always felt a sense of lacking something. But even though it was Oni who had taken his parents' lives, he never once felt any burning desire for revenge. In fact, in telling Manaka this story, he even felt a sense of relief, as though a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. He explained to Manaka that he could barely remember anything about his parents. Both of them were always too busy with their work at the Momotaro Corporation and rarely got the chance to go home. Even when they died, he admitted that he hardly even thought about it. Manaka was surprised by the honesty in Tsubakiri's story, and from that day on, Manaka started bringing Tsubakiri into his family home daily so they could bond and share meals. Manaka introduced Tsubakiri to his wife and his little daughter, who was addicted to her favorite anime, Kibatsu no Taiga. According to Tsubakiri, every time Manaka brought him to his family's house, he felt that his life became more and more complicated, like a maze. Tsubakiri believed that the path from life to death was supposed to be simple and straight. But when a person gets involved in the life of another, that path becomes as complex as a labyrinth. Still, even with that belief, he never declined his senpai's invitations. He found the living space of Manaka's family small and cramped, but it was the only place where he could eat a home-cooked meal that felt familiar and somewhat nostalgic. In the days that followed, while the two were on a cigarette break, Tsubakiri asked Manaka why he decided to start a family even though he had been in their line of work for so long. He asked if family didn't just serve as a weakness. Manaka simply smiled at Tsubakiri's question and asked what he meant. According to Manaka, his family was his very reason to make it home alive each day. But nothing could change Tsubakiri's mind. No matter how much Manaka insisted that he quit smoking, Tsubakiri refused. In the end, he still believed that anything a person holds dear only becomes a weakness. And unfortunately, Tsubakiri witnessed the very belief he held become reality, as he looked down sorrowfully at the bloody corpse of his senpai lying on the street. The tragedy happened during a house raid where multiple Oni were living. Among them was a young Oni child. Naturally, the child was included in their kill list, but there was something different about this particular Oni child. She was the splitting image of Manaka's daughter. They looked alike, had similar hair, stature, and even wore the same merchandise sweater from their shared favorite anime, Kibatsu no Taiga. The moment Manaka saw the child Oni, he saw his own daughter. Because of this, he gave her the chance to run and escape. But fate took an even crueler turn. The Oni child went berserk after witnessing the tragedy and began rampaging through the neighborhood, killing many civilians and members of the Momotaro Corporation. When Manaka saw the victims of the child Oni, she had already picked her next target and was charging quickly. Manaka was about to kill the child Oni, but he suddenly paused in surprise when he saw who the targets were. It was his wife and daughter, who just happened to be walking near the crime scene on their way to go shopping. Manaka hesitated for too long, clouded by emotion and unable to decide what to do. Because of that, he sustained a fatal wound after shielding his family from the berserk child Oni's attack. He managed to completely stop and kill the child Oni, but in a tragic twist, he still failed to save his wife and daughter. They died after sustaining fatal injuries from the same Oni. According to Tsubakiri, he considered using his powers at the time, but he also understood that if he used them in that situation, there was a high possibility Manaka's family would get caught in the incident. And he knew Manaka wouldn't have wanted that, so he did nothing in those moments. For now, Monaka still had a bit of life left and was able to confess his final realization to Tsubakiri. He admitted he had been wrong. Having sympathy for Oni was a huge mistake. He regretted not being more ruthless. He blamed the death of his family on his own lack of ruthlessness. After venting his regrets to Tsubakiri, he coughed up blood from his fatal wounds. And before taking his final breath, he gave Tsubakiri a final piece of advice, or rather, an order. He said Oni must be wiped out immediately. Even baby or child Oni should never be allowed to escape. Tsubakiri had no words. He simply stared at his senpai with cold-blooded eyes. Then Monaka told Tsubakiri his dying wish. After he died, he wanted Tsubakiri to use his corpse as a weapon, because he could never accept that his life would end just like that, filled with regrets. This is the backstory of how Tsubakiri acquired Monaka's corpse and was granted access to use it under his control. Eventually, he was promoted to the position of commanding officer after killing countless Oni using his powers and his most powerful corpse weapon. Then, we suddenly return to the present where Tsubakiri awakens from his dream of the past. As he feels the blood leaking from his head and body, the gloomy thought in his mind is the inconceivability of the idea of defeat. But then he realizes that he's already in the middle of a situation where he is experiencing defeat firsthand. When he looks at Monaka's corpse, he sees it has already caught fire and started to burn along with the collapsing, flaming room around them, a result of Shiki's flames and the force unleashed by the blood giant above ground. Tsubakiri is shocked, and his face fills with concern as he mutters a curse. Even he and his clothes are now burning, and he looks too weak to even crawl, let alone stand, because of the damage and wounds he's sustained. But despite that, he forces himself to crawl toward Monaka's corpse using every bit of strength he has left. He screams in his mind, cursing himself for underestimating Shiki so much. At this point, because of the injuries he sustained, he can no longer feel the heat of the environment or the flames touching his body. But he endures it all because of his overwhelming determination. He tells himself that this is fine, even if everything is burning. According to him, they haven't lost yet. And as he stares at Monaka's corpse, he asks if he wasn't right in saying their fight isn't over. Desperate, Tsubakiri begs for a response and approval from Monaka, because what he truly wants deep in his heart is to help his departed senpai clear all the regrets he left behind in the world, regrets that Tsubakiri now carries. Tsubakiri tries to reach out with his left hand toward Monaka's body while thinking about the many Oni still left in the world, and he firmly believes that he and Monaka can still fulfill their goal together. But when Tsubakiri sees a massive flame engulf Monaka's body, he suddenly stops his crawling effort. He is overwhelmed with grief and almost begins to cry as he watches his senpai's corpse cook in the fire. Because of this, he loses all strength and can no longer maintain the effort of reaching out with his left hand until it finally drops to the floor. Then the fire consuming Monaka's corpse grows even bigger, and Tsubakiri can do nothing but watch as Monaka is cremated right before his eyes. After that, he collapses fully onto the ground and loses consciousness, small patches of fire continuing to burn parts of his body. Meanwhile, we see Shiki standing, dazed, unable to believe he actually won the battle. He's so spaced out he doesn't even notice that the entire area is now burning and collapsing. Even Mei is just staring at him in amazement. Then, a massive chunk of rubble crashes down from the ceiling, snapping them both out of their trance and waking them to reality. Shiki realizes how bad the situation is, that he and Mei can no longer stay there. So he tells Mei that they need to start running toward the exit. Mei doesn't respond and just waits for Shiki to lead her. But just as Shiki takes his first step, he suddenly collapses from extreme exhaustion. Mei was shocked and called out to him. When she sees Shiki fall face first onto the floor. When she sees him start vomiting large amounts of blood after falling, Mei goes pale with fear and worry. She kneels beside him, trying to wake him up, panicking because she doesn't know what to do. She's terrified that the two of them might die there. But then we suddenly see a barefooted person arrive, seemingly here to help. Who could this be? But before we find out who that is, let's first go back to the battle between Yomogi and Mudano, along with the other Oni officers. Like this bald Oni officer who asked Mudano what they should do about the thing in front of them. Mudano had no answer. He just said it didn't look like Yomogi had any plans coming out soon from the black box she had created. So Mudano decided that they should just leave Yomogi behind, believing that with the strength Yomogi had left, she wouldn't be able to keep her walls standing for much longer. The bald Oni officer asked Mudano if he was really sure about that decision. Inside the black box, we see Yomogi looking worried and clearly beaten up. In her thoughts, she said it was already hard enough facing a large number of men alone, but it became even harder because Mudano was with them. That was why she locked herself inside the black box. Mudano noticed that the underground facility's walls were close to completely collapsing, so he told the others that they had to prioritize getting everyone out of there. Kugisaki suddenly asked him if he had seen the Playboy doctor on his way over. Mudano asked if he meant Kyoya, and when confirmed, he said no, he hadn't seen him. Kugisaki grew deeply worried about Kyoya, having no idea what had happened to him. Then, while the two passed by a room as they walked, they suddenly stopped in shock at what they saw inside. There was someone being treated by another person they were surprised to see. Apparently, Kyoya was totally fine and had just finished treating the fatal injuries that Shiki had sustained. Kugisaki couldn't believe the doctor was still alive. Kyoya explained that he was barely alive because he had almost died earlier from having his heart arteries slashed. But thanks to the blood dripping from the ceiling, he had managed to drink it and recover using that. He admitted he was honestly just very lucky to be able to do that. After that, he came to this room to discreetly treat patients in secret. While Kyoya was saying that the other kids were getting ready to evacuate, we see Mudano staring at the floor. He said it looked unsightly. It was Tsubikiri, the man he saw sprawled on the ground while some lingering fire patches still burned around him. Tsubikiri answered that he felt the same way about Mudano. Meanwhile, Kugisaki still had his eyes wide in shock and disbelief that the weakling Shiki had managed to defeat Tsubikiri alone. Mudano raised his hand and created his umbrella weapon to finish off Tsubikiri. He also asked him how it felt to experience Shiki's Kishin powers firsthand before dying. Tsubikiri smiled and said it was unbelievable. But after that, he gave a friendly warning, saying that from what he observed, it looked like Shiki's own flames were eating away at his life force. Kyoya and Mudano's serious reactions made it clear that this was truly bad news, and they were not happy about it. Kugisaki asked Kyoya what he meant earlier by Kishin powers. But since they were still busy, Kyoya said he'd explain it to him later. For now, the place was close to collapsing, and they had to get out. After a few moments, everyone had evacuated, and Yomogi finally made it over to Tsubikiri. But she was shocked to discover that her senpai had already died. Seeing that Tsubikiri was no longer breathing, she told him that he shouldn't have died like this. And there was a reason for that. Yomogi was on the verge of tears from the mixed emotions she felt about Tsubikiri's daughter, who had just recently been born. Yomogi couldn't understand why Tsubikiri had decided to start building a family, but she was sure that Monica had been a huge influence on Tsubikiri's decision. Even within their organization, many people had called Tsubikiri strange and weird. But even so, he remained strong and stayed true to himself and his beliefs. At his funeral, this was the memory Yomogi carried of her senpai. He was a man who, through a chance encounter with a coworker, had grown into someone who upheld his strong Momotaro spirit all the way to death. And now, Tsubikiri was officially declared to be killed in action at the young age of 31. Sometime later, Shiki suddenly woke up from his long sleep. He saw that Kyoya was next to him and asked where they were. He even called him Playboy Senpai. We also see that they were wearing comfortable robes. Kyoya was happy that Shiki had finally woken up, so he explained that they were currently at a hostel run by an Oni. It was already 5:24 a.m., so their classmates were resting in their rooms. Then, Shiki was confused when he suddenly received a bottle of water. It turned out to be from Mudano, who praised him with a good job for taking down Tsubikiri. It was only then that Shiki remembered what had happened, and he felt happy at the memory of his victory. But he still couldn't fully rejoice because he kept remembering what had happened to Mei. He asked if there was really no way to resuscitate Mei's parents. Mudano confirmed that he was right, and even if they were celebrating victory, they must not forget their fallen comrades. And no matter what tragedy comes, they had to keep moving onwards. Meanwhile, we see Mei still unable to sleep from overwhelming sadness, eyes filled with tears. Kiriyama also couldn't sleep, disturbed by the loud banging from the other room where Sazanami was. Sazanami was desperately trying to get Kiriyama to let her into his room. Among all their classmates, only Yoroshi was sleeping soundly. Kugisaki was meditating and deep in thought. Biaobugora was lying down but couldn't fall asleep. Usurube was still awake, pulling out tissue. He might have been crying or doing something sinful. Mudano stared far out the window, continuing what he had been saying earlier. As they watched the sunrise, he reminded them to cherish the simple gift of waking up to another day, at least for now. Shiki deeply reflected on Mudano's words. In the afternoon, the ship that would carry Mudano and his students back to Rakshasa Academy in Onigashima arrived. The classmates prepared to say their goodbyes, and Usurube said that the next time they came back, he hoped they could finally do normal sightseeing. Kyoya laughed at Usurube's joke and agreed. They really should return to Kyoto someday for a proper visit, especially now that Mei was being absorbed into their section of the Oni Corporation. It was only right to come see her. Mei looked sad and shy as she said goodbye. Then, Mudano told his students that it was time to leave. So they all walked toward the ship while Mei stayed behind, shy and tightly clutching her clothes. But before Shiki could walk too far, Mei finally swallowed her shyness and called out to him. With a big smile, she thanked him energetically. She said that when the day came that she could finally be with her mama and papa again in heaven, she wanted to be able to tell them that she had been happy here on earth. So she decided that she would do her very best until then. Shiki still couldn't smile because of everything that had happened recently. So many lives had been lost, and he knew even harder challenges were ahead. But when he remembered the sadness on Mei's face before and compared it to her present happy smile, he realized that the future could still change. The meaning of life and their desperation to cling to it came from hope for the future, not pain from the past. And that was why they should never lose heart. And because of that, Shiki was finally able to return Mei's smile with a smile of his own. All the classmates happily said goodbye before boarding the ship. Shiki had a big smile on his face, while Kugisaki kept his poker face. Sazanami was still obsessed with Kiriyama, and Usurube was wondering what was going on between the two. Yoroshi was irritated because he felt like he hadn't done a single important thing in Kyoto, while Mudano remained serious. As the ship sailed toward the horizon where the sunrise lay, the only thing in Shiki's heart was that for the sake of their future, they had to do their best. Sometime later, life at Rakshasa Academy had returned to normal. Mudano was currently teaching his students that the Oni Corporation could roughly be divided into 3 units: Combat Unit, Patrol Unit, and Medical Unit. That was an oversimplification, but basically, once his students graduated, they would be enlisted into one of those 3 units. Placement was based on their abilities. But while Mudano was teaching, he suddenly got annoyed and stopped because of the groaning sounds he kept hearing. Shiki was groaning loudly as he took notes, his eyes wide open from mental stress. Then, he would suddenly fall asleep on the spot from exhaustion. But he would also suddenly wake up a few seconds later and start groaning again from the stress. Kugisaki remained quiet in class, and Yoroshi was loudly snoring, sleeping soundly in class. Sazanami was obsessively watching Kiriyama, and Biaobugora and Usurube were quietly sitting. Mudano walked over to Yoroshi and raised his hand for a powerful finger snap. When he snapped his fingers, it created an explosive snapping sound so loud that Yoroshi woke up instantly in a panic. His head hurt from the snap, and Mudano scolded him, saying that if he didn't want to be in this class, he should just leave. He also scolded Shiki, calling him a nuisance for groaning so much. Then, the classroom clock rang, signaling the end of class. But Mudano didn't dismiss the students yet because it was time for homeroom, where they would be assigned to dorm rooms. Rakshasa Academy was a boarding school. Each room had to be occupied by 2 students. So Mudano told them to pair up. Shiki was excited, saying it felt like a school trip. In contrast, Yoroshi was annoyed because he didn't want to live with anyone. The attentive and proactive Usurube raised his hand to inform Mudano that if they paired up, one male would be left out. Given that information, Mudano said that whoever was left alone would have to room with him. Shiki and Yoroshi were shocked and terrified by what Mudano said. For the 2 of them, being paired with Mudano was like being locked up in prison. Shiki screamed that he absolutely didn't want to be paired with Mudano. Yoroshi angrily told him that since he was the dumb one, he should be the one to go with their sensei. Kiriyama thought that if he ended up as Mudano's roommate, it would feel like he was saving his own life. Kugisaki and Bialbugora couldn't say anything, each awkward in their own way. Yusurube started worrying because he knew he'd never have alone time again if he ended up with Mudano. Then, Sazanami suddenly declared that she and Kiriyama would pair up in one room. Kiriyama was surprised by that. Yusurube violently reacted like a madman, unable to believe what Sazanami had said. Shiki blushed and squealed because he realized that there really was something going on between Sazanami and Kiriyama. Kugisaki felt like Shiki wanted to talk to him, so he cut him off and said not to. Yusurube then screamed at Kiriyama, saying he'd kill him. He grabbed his shoulders and cried in anger, saying he thought Kiriyama was one of them. Kiriyama asked, "One of what?" Mudano immediately said he wasn't allowing Sazanami and Kiriyama to pair up in the same room. Boys and girls had to be separated. Sazanami tried to reason that no one would take care of Kiriyama if they weren't together. Someone asked her what she meant by take care. She then gave a long explanation and listed her all-day plans to care for Kiriyama. From waking up to going back to sleep, there would be plenty of opportunities to snuggle. Shiki turned pale and said, "Yikes," from the information overload. Then he walked over to Yusurube with an equally angry face. Shiki said he didn't know if he was mad or jealous, but Yusurube agreed that he felt the same. Shiki just told Kiriyama not to get cocky. Yusurube asked how far he and Sazanami had gone. Then Yoroshi slammed the table and agreed with their sensei. It really wasn't right for a boy and girl to share a room. His classmates were impressed that he said something decent. Then, Yoroshi sat down casually, put his feet up, blushed, and said that kind of thing should only happen after turning 20. Shiki was irritated by his bad manners, but admitted he had a point. Shiki and Yusurube agreed that Yoroshi was probably still a virgin too, but neither of them admitted they were virgins themselves. Shiki walked up to Bialbugora to ask if she could talk to and convince Sazanami, because if they did nothing, Kiriyama would win in this situation alone. Bialbugora was flustered and couldn't speak, clearly thinking about something else. Then she suddenly stood up, grabbed her school bag, and apologized, saying it was her fault they had an odd number. She said she'd been inconsiderate, apologized again, and said she'd just live outside. Shiki grew worried and said she misunderstood him. Bialbugora added that she'd just set up camp outside using a cardboard box. Shiki got stressed imagining the scene she described. So he just blamed Kugisaki, saying he should have been the one to share a room with Mudano in the first place. Kugisaki casually and arrogantly replied, "I'm fine alone." Yoroshi, Shiki, and Yusurube all pouted and got goosebumps from how arrogant he sounded. Yoroshi said Kugisaki clearly didn't know how to read the room. Yusurube explained that Kugisaki's words weren't true. Instead of being fine alone, the truth was that he really wanted to be alone. Shiki commented that Kugisaki was the type who sang Western songs at karaoke. Then, Shiki asked Yoroshi if he wanted to pair up. Yoroshi just glared at him in confusion. Yusurube got sad, thinking he'd be left out. Then suddenly, Yoroshi raised his voice and arrogantly said, "Was Shiki kidding?" because he had no intention of pairing with anyone. Shiki replied, "Look who's talking," and asked if he was stupid. Yusurube's jaw dropped in sadness because the two of them suddenly forgot about him. But Kiriyama approached and asked if he wanted to pair up. Kiriyama had been able to approach Yusurube because Sazanami was too busy complaining to Mudano about not being allowed to room with him. Yusurube's mood and expression lit up because of Kiriyama. He grabbed Kiriyama's shoulder again. But instead of being happy, his vision darkened, and he tried to hold back intense rage. He said he hated it the most when normies pitted him. He asked Kiriyama if he really wanted to talk about his sex life just to rub in that he was a lowlife. And did he really plan to mentally drain him? Kiriyama had no sane reply and just screamed in fear. Then he hung his head in sadness, saying he must be destined to die alone. But Sazanami came back to him and told him not to worry because she was right here by his side. Yusurube spat in frustration and mumbled about how irritated he was by normies. Meanwhile, Shiki was growing anxious about how long his classmates were taking to pair up. Yoroshi told him that maybe he should just share a room with Mudano. Shiki said he didn't want to because he liked gossiping before bed. Yoroshi said none of them planned to do that anyway. Then Shiki told them that he had once been suspended in middle school and even kicked out of high school. So he really wanted to experience school trips. Yusurube asked in disbelief if Shiki had actually gone to high school. Shiki was surprised to learn that Yusurube had never made it that far. Yusurube explained that he had awakened as an Oni early. Yoroshi said he had the same experience. Shiki was surprised because he didn't know about the two of them. He realized that everyone there had probably gone through something heavy too. But since the class still wasn't pairing up, Mudano got irritated and told them not to waste his time. He ordered the two girls to pair up while the boys had 2 minutes to decide using rock, paper, scissors. Shiki agreed with a determined face. In this variation of rock, paper, scissors, the ones who threw matching hands would pair up. And on the first try, there were already 2 pairs of rock and paper. The one left out was the one who threw scissors. That student was Yusurube. He went insane from how fast it all happened and couldn't believe he was the one left out again after everything. He dropped to his knees in defeat and sweated heavily. To calm himself, he said it was fine even if he didn't get alone time anymore, and that he'd just be eco-friendly by saving lots of tissue. Shiki celebrated like he had just won something, yelling jailbreak. He was just really happy that he didn't have to room with Mudano. But his celebration stopped when he realized his roommate would be Kugisaki. He started blubbering incomprehensible words from overwhelming fear and anxiety. He felt like life would be miserable and joyless with Kugisaki around. Kugisaki just let out a humph at Shiki's comment. Then he remembered what Kyoya had told him about Shiki being a child of the Kishin who had inherited powers from their ancestors. He brought it up and told Shiki, "Don't let it get to your head." Shiki was shocked, confused, and irritated by how Kugisaki said it like he was picking a fight. In the end, this was how the classmates were paired. Yoroshi ended up rooming with Kiriyama. Meanwhile in Tokyo, we hear the news circulating within the Momotaro Corporation about the death of Commander Tsubakiri. Because of this, they assumed that the Kishin named Shiki possessed insane power. So now, they're going all out to annihilate him. Not just him, but every last one of the other Kishin children as well. Inside the office building of the Momotaro Corporation, we see Shinya walking excitedly through the hallway, thinking this is his chance. He could already smell the promotion coming his way as soon as he kills the Kishin Oni child responsible for taking down Tsubakiri. He smiled even more at the thought that this Kishin was also the same Oni child who escaped from Samidare. It was another perfect opportunity for him to drag Samidare down. He told his partner that it was time for them to make a move. His partner asked whether it was really okay to act outside their jurisdiction, but Shinya simply replied that it didn't matter anymore, because no one would complain once they returned with great results. Their plan was to be the ones to bring back Shiki's head.